Good evening. I'd like to call the September 12th, 2017 Longmont City Council meeting to order. This is a regular session. Could we please start with a roll call?
Yes, Mayor Coombs.
Here.
Council members Bagley.
Here.
Christensen. Finley. Here. Moore. Here. Peck. Santos. Mayor Coombs, we have a quorum.
Okay, let's stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anyone wishing to speak at first call, public invited to be heard, will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at first call, public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their name on the list will have an opportunity to speak at final call, public invited to be heard, or during the public hearing items during the meeting. So now we have the July 11th, 2017 council members, or regular session to approve. Councilmember Finley.
I move approval of the July 11th minutes.
All right, it's been moved and seconded by Jeff Moore, and let's vote. And that passes 6-0 with Councilmember Santos absent. Anyway, now we have the July 25th regular session meeting to approve. Councilmember Finley.
Did you have something that we need to change? Okay. I move approval of the July 25th, 2017 minutes.
All right, it's been moved and seconded again by Councilmember Moore. Let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Santos absent. So now we have agenda revisions. Councilmember Christensen.
I'd like to bring forth a resolution that we add to the agenda as soon as possible. This is a resolution that is based on other resolutions that have been passed throughout the county and throughout the country. And it's a resolution in support of the extension of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals DACA program and permanent legal status for Dreamers. The reason I'm bringing this forth is that last week we had a rally at which the mayor spoke. This is a problem for our community because all these people who gave who are here in this country without papers and came here before the age of 16 have no protection. And the damage started 2 weeks ago. No more people will be able to sign up. Anyone who needs an extension has to cough up $500 in the next 3 weeks or be deported. And people whose status has lapsed will be deported. This is a resolution that I could read out loud, but it's somewhat long, and we're not voting on it tonight. So,
right, I would recommend not doing that, but just kind of, does everybody hopefully agrees that bring forward this resolution? Okay, we'll do it, and then I'll see what comes out and edit it and whatnot. Six.
okay, I move that we resolve that we put a resolution into the agenda.
Second.
All right, so moving and seconded.
Don't I have to say what it is? Yes,
So-
I do.
Okay, then we'll officially vote on it, so it's on the record.
All right.
Okay, let's vote. And that passes 6-0. Thank you, Polly. Valerie, are there any other agenda revisions?
No, Mayor Coombs, there are no other revisions.
Is there a report from the city manager?
Mayor and Council, one of the things that you all asked us to look into was the potential of locating a carousel here in Longmont, the family that had possession of it. We have followed up in talking to those individuals, and they have provided us with some information. Sandy sent that to you last night. In general, it looks like the purchase cost and what it would cost to put a building around it is approximately $1.3 million. I think folks thought they wanted to donate the carousel. They didn't. They wanted to sell it. And then it looks like there would also be, just on the operating estimates, the need for an operating subsidy of about $47,000. What we wanted to do tonight is check in with council. The family's happy to make a presentation to you all if you're interested, but we wanted to see, based on the information we provided, if you wanted us to bring them and place it on an item for discussion. We're selling it.
Councilmember Christensen?
Have we evaluated how much work would have to be done on it to make it operable?
We think that's in that $1.3 million number.
And have we checked into whether there would be any state funds from History Colorado or historical preservation, the statewide historical preservation?
We have not checked into that.
Okay, yeah. That's a lot of money, but it would be, I think it would be a nice addition to the town. However, we have a lot of things we have to also fix up. I would like to hear a presentation from them. I think that would be wonderful.
But not tonight, we got so much stuff on our...
No, we would place it on a future, we would place it on a future agenda. We just wanted to see if council wanted us to do that.
Yeah. I guess I wouldn't mind seeing the presentation, but, you know, my thoughts are, you know, we've got some real serious problem with affordable housing and stuff. It's hard to justify spending money on other things that aren't our most critical. I mean, I love carousels, and when I go to Spokane, it's kind of fun, especially with my kids, to ride on a carousel up there. But, yeah, it's tough. Councilmember Finley.
I just don't think we can afford it at this time. I think it would be cool too, but I think it would be something better suited for either a nonprofit or a for-profit company to take on. It's not just the purchase of it, but the maintenance of it and the running of it. And you know, we have, our job is the health, safety, and wellness of our citizens, not entertainment of them. So I wouldn't be in favor of bringing it back, because I think we have limited resources and time and money, and we need to spend them on more critical items.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Well, it'd be cool to have, I think it falls outside the scope of what city services are supposed to provide to the residents. Sounds more like a private enterprise than a public use. And I would say that they need to find someone that really wants to do it. The city doesn't really have the financing right now to do it. And it would probably make a good private enterprise operation, but it's not, it falls outside the scope of city services and what the city's required to do for infrastructure, and we have other pressing needs, so I would not be supportive of it.
Fine.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess I would not like it brought back. I can't imagine, even if it's the coolest, biggest, most historically unique carousel on the planet. Right now, I mean, we're trying to convince people in November, or we aren't, but it's on the ballot. And I personally, as a private citizen, would like to see the Windy Gap Fermi project pass. And that's $1.82 a month, and that's water. We need water. I don't think we need a carousel. I agree with my fellow council members.
I was going to say, if I could also, I mean, so I'm sort of seeing three, or 3 and 2. One of the suggestions I could make is that we could reach back out to the individual that brought it to our attention, and we could talk to them about creating some sort of local grassroots initiative, and then if they can come together and pull the information together and develop a fundraising plan, then maybe that
maybe more of a
an opportunity
public-private partnership.
to create that, and we could sort of have that conversation with them, and then if they're able to develop that and come up with some other options, then that may be the right time. We can
Okay.
take that approach. Yep.
Councilmember Peck?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. You know, when I first brought this to council, both Ms. Nave and Mr. Tigger, I think that's his name, the owner of the carousel, said it was donated. So had I even thought that they were going to sell it, I would have said no. I don't know what in the process made them change their mind, but I'm not really interested in purchasing it. But your idea, Harold, is a good one.
Okay.
And I think we should go that way. That would be great.
Okay.
Councilmember Christensen?
Yeah, when she also came to remind us at Coffee with Council a month or two ago that she had written about this, and she didn't mention that she wanted money for it. So I'm not inclined to take on more things that we have to maintain. But if somebody, I do think it would be useful to them, and it might be useful for them to do a brief presentation here to give it publicity and to get some private people interested in it and to get the town interested in it, to get the Historical Society or whatever, and any help we can give them to direct them to some private things. I think it could be a tourist attraction, like the one out on that's far east, almost to Kansas. Where? Yeah. Anyway, but you know, it isn't, as we have all said, it's not a crying need right now, and we have to fix the flood mitigation first. So much as I love carousels, I would still like to see a presentation though.
So I think what we'll do is we'll reach out to them and talk about some type of grassroots effort, and then see how that develops, and then provide a council with an update in the future.
Okay. So now we'll move on to public invited to be heard, and Leo Haker is up first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was in my ivory tower thinking about our new health food store, Whole Foods Walmart. As you know, Whole Foods Walmart was acquired by the mail order company Amazon. Mail order Brussels sprouts, how tasty. Then I recall how the city of Longmont approved $2.5 million or so in subsidies so that Whole Foods Walmart could, quote, provide jobs. Now this $2.5 million or so is a direct subsidy to Amazon.com. Is this payment to Amazon a violation of security laws? Do you know how many small businesses Amazon has put out of business? Only emphasizing the anti-small business climate here in Longmont. So how is Bezos, Amazon's owner, going to repay this $2.5 million or so? Is he going to get a hair transplant for himself? I read in a Facebook blog that all Longmont taxpayers get a free $20 gift card to Whole Foods Walmart. Ha, you couldn't pay me to shop there. Still in my ivory tower, I began to think about how the Denver Post outlined the city's $100,000 retainer to an 800-member international law firm to defend a sexual harassment lawsuit brought by City Councilperson Peck. Are there not enough lawyers in Boulder County to help the city defend a sexual harassment lawsuit? Nothing more bizarre than to read Berkeley and Michigan graduates defend sexual harassment in this city alongside of Roy Moore. I'm really sorry, Mrs. Peck. I know what it's like to be a victim of unwanted touching. Just imagine if there's a lot of groping going on and unwanted touching of the city council members, what are you guys doing to our city's budget and tax dollars? Are you guys groping my tax dollars? My avatar analysis is that this is a concocted lawsuit to defund a political action committee. The $800-member law firm, hundreds of thousands of dollars of retainers, maybe even a large settlement. Who's running for office with this money? Mr. Mayor, are you running against Kim Buck? Ms. Peck, are you running for office? Is the city attorney getting tired of his 14 years as a city attorney? I'm announcing my candidacy as an independent candidate against Congressional District 4 Kim Buck. The Republican Boulder County lacks leadership. My first act in Congress is to ask the Congressional Budget Office to eliminate all federal funding to the city of Longmont. That way, we can cause financial stress to the city, getting rid of the corruption and waste of money. My second act would be to impose term limits for all city council, for all city members.
3 minutes are up.
Okay, thank you.
Strider Benston.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Strider Benston, 951 West 17th Street. I hadn't heard about the carousel. It's like I've only once been on one in the last 65 years, but that was in Edinburgh, and it was a giant carousel, and it's like, wow, a really big one is really interesting, even for adults. Yeah, so many things going on. The DACA, I appreciate your 6-0 vote. Out front last week, we had 160 people supporting the DACA kids, and with them, Times Call didn't count. They just estimated 100. I count it was 160. And now we have a very interesting thing going on, aside from the fact that our president conspired with a foreign power to overthrow our democracy. And Scott Pruitt, the head of the EPA, he wasn't able to absolutely destroy it yet, so there were still some pretty effective and pretty good coordination between local, state, and even national government. But if the Nazi Steve Bannon still runs the show from the outside now, the entire plan is to destroy America. And pay attention, that is going on. And as far as 1,000-year storms, well, we had 2 in 2 weeks. That is the new normal, and people better wake up and do what we can to deal with it. And I mention again Jim Hansen, America's #1 climate scientist, who wrote Storms of My Grandchildren and talked about these 2 this week, although he published this book 9 years ago. So that is what we're dealing with, and it is the new normal, and we better wake up and get serious about it. Thank you.
Okay, that ends public invited to be heard. Yeah, Councilmember Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. Do you guys mind if I ask one more item to be put on the agenda? Does anyone object? I think that we need to ask city staff to bring us back an agenda item and start looking at what we're going to do with the transient population in Longmont. Walking up and down Main Street this last week, several of the local small businesses have expressed concern that in tears about urination, defecation, sleeping, drug use, hacking into the power supply there on Main Street, and it's becoming a problem. I was driving to a city council event this week and saw transients on the medians that we, have now said that it's illegal to panhandle. They were panhandling on the medians. And I just think that we need to come up with a plan. It's getting worse, and I don't see it on any future agenda, and I think that we need to direct staff that we need to deal with this problem, because it's starting to impact downtown and the rest of the city.
I think we all realize it's a problem. I was contacted by the owner of the ice cream store across the street from the pump house about the same issue. I don't mind, I just don't know what the solutions are. Maybe staff has got some ideas.
Yeah, so what I'd like to see is, there's got to be better. There's other cities out there, bigger than us, older than us.
Smarter than us.
What have they done? What works, what doesn't, and what are we going to do?
Okay.
I've got thoughts, but I'd like some concrete data, and then we can make some decisions as a city council.
So our plan was, I believe we scheduled, and if we can move it up, but what we did is we scheduled a time on the 29th of September where we were going to take council out and go to some of the areas, and then what we were going to do is follow that up with an item on the agenda to talk about this and to talk about what we're doing, what we plan to do, and provide more scope to that. If council desires for us to do it, yeah, so I think if we stay with our plan, that gives us the time we need to build some of the other pieces that we're talking about. The one thing I would say is, did you see them on the intersections with the signs where they can't panhandle? So it was the ones that were signed. Okay. Because I've seen them in other intersections and called, and they were not the intersections that were. Okay. So we can have that conversation about those intersections now.
Councilmember Peck?
Thank you. Actually, I think this is a good idea. Thank you for bringing it up, Councilman Bagley. We do have a task force, don't we, on homeless?
We do.
Can you bring that task force recommendations to us as well?
So we've been bringing some of those recommendations to you all. Where we're really at today is most of that work was focused internally, and we finished that piece, and now we're starting to look at the broader community perspective on these issues. You all have voted on 3 or 4 items that we put in play. What we're talking about now is really a more comprehensive strategy. So we know the work that Karen's talked to the council about in terms of the new programming with Boulder County, City of Boulder, and the others in terms of how services are going to be delivered. We've also talked about what public safety is doing. What we know is that over the last 6 months or so, we've issued approximately 600 citations and a combination of 600 citations and arrests. So we have that piece going. What we are talking about beyond that is a more streamlined process on identifying locations where they're not supposed to be and cleaning those areas up as quickly as possible. We're also talking about engaging the business community in part of the process. How do we engage neighborhoods in that process? How do we communicate to the public on some of these issues and the challenges that we're facing? Because what we know is there's a lot we can do, but one of the things that we found as we've looked at other communities, it's really a process that takes the entire community to resolve. Government has been trying for hundreds of years in some form to manage this, and it's continuing to be a challenge. And so that's what we want to bring back, is this more all-encompassing approach.
Councilmember Bagley?
Councilmember Heck, one more thing. Would it be more productive, rather than have it at a council meeting, but have it at somewhat of a round table with council and staff discussing it without it being so formal, and actually just throwing ideas out? And I think that would be more productive anyway.
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess to be clear, I think I would not be opposed to that. I think it's a good idea. What I'm hoping for is that in my mind when I raise this issue, just like affordable housing has, is housing affordable, and will there be subsidized housing right? I see this as two problems. One is people in our community, Longmont family, who become homeless and require assistance. And then on this, over here, you've got transients that are coming to Longmont as a result of X. And so I would like to see a real, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I would like to see a comprehensive presentation giving us the facts by city staff saying, here's the homeless, affordable housing, you know, the Circles program, the RISE program, those kind of people who are needing assistance. And over here, this is currently our transient situation, and I want to know what's causing this, but what's causing this. And then we need to figure out what's bringing them here and fix it. And so, and I would also expect that city staff would come up with, rather than just getting together, again, I'm more than willing to do that, but after that, I would want the city staff, the experts, hire experts, whatever, to then present us with, these are our options. Here's a plan to really attack and take care of this problem.
And that's what we're putting together. What I would say is, and some of you may have heard me use this analogy before, but I really equate it to an onion. And there's so many different layers and aspects of homelessness. And most of it we don't see. Whether it's individuals that have had a medical issue or have lost their job suddenly, but then they're in another job. They may be living in their cars, but we don't necessarily see it. We don't have impacts. You have families that are homeless. You have folks that are staying with relatives and moving around. But as you get to it, you know, when I talk to the police department and others, what they really say is that it's an issue with, and they, Jeff's here, I think the term is travelers, that we're seeing the issue. And where we've started talking about it is we're also seeing that the encounters are becoming more aggressive. And so when we talk about homelessness and when we hear the problems, and we hear them too, we take calls on a regular basis, and when we're doing this, what we're really hearing is it's about that population. And if you remember what Karen talked about, the programs that are going to be put in place and the work that they're doing with the other agencies is really focused on those who want to change their condition. And even within that realm, there's two programs. There's one that's going to be a more streamlined, quick process where you get them into, when you get individuals into housing very quickly, try to get them connected to jobs, and they don't have a lot of the other issues that surround homelessness. There's going to be a more lengthy process that's going to focus on those individuals that have substance abuse, mental health issues, and there's going to be more services surrounding that to then try to get those individuals to the point where we can shift into the housing piece. There is a third category that we've talked about as staff, and as we talk about it, in many cases it's people that are making lifestyle choices. And we've talked about the fact that they may not want to go into this. And I think that's what we're hearing from our community, and that's the strategy that we're going to bring in terms of looking at that layer and how that impacts our community. So I think it's what you're saying, and that's what, yeah.
It's becoming a problem.
Yeah.
It is a problem. And so yes, that's exactly what I would expect.
Councilmember Christensen?
Well, Karen did talk to us about that 2 weeks ago, didn't she?
She did, but that's
Yes.
only one piece of what
I
we've
know.
talked about as the broader conversation, because
Right.
internally we've had the same.
Yes, and it
reaction.
is a problem that it would be helpful to have the police department come talk to us. Because it's really a problem of very few people, but doing huge amounts of damage. Like my friends who were sitting in their house in Boulder about a month ago, and some guy breaks in the window in the backyard, starts screaming that they're Satan, and he's going to kill them. And, you know, this is not the kind of town anybody wants. But it's a very small percentage of people. But that's what we have to figure out how to deal with. And we have been trying, you know, on a countywide basis for years, and I do think that is coming together, and I think that will be successful. But when we're hearing that 30% of the police cases wind up being dealing with issues of homelessness, that concerns me, because that's very hard on everybody, especially the officers, and you know. So I mean, we have been hearing all along what everybody's doing, but
Well, kind of like we're all in the same agreement, so can we just move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you all know kind of, that's what we were prepping to bring you as a
Right.
result of the tour and then this conversation.
Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda.
Mayor Coombs, your first item is 8A, ordinance 2017-57, the bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2017. Public hearing and second reading of this ordinance is September 26th. Item 8B is ordinance 2017-58, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of a 5-foot utility easement on lots 1 and 2, block 89, original town of Longmont, generally located south of 2nd Avenue and east of Main Street. The public hearing and second reading is scheduled for September 26th. Item 8C is resolution 2017-82, approving the First Amendment to the agreement between the city and Prairie Mountain Publishing Company, LLP, for an archiving agreement. Item 8D is resolution 2017-83, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the clerk and recorder for Boulder County for placement of mail ballot drop-off box in Garden Acres Park. Item 8E is resolution 2017-84, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Bureau of Justice Assistance of the United States Department of Justice for grant funding for the purchase of bulletproof vests in 2015. Item 8F is resolution 2017-85, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city, county of Boulder, and the city of Boulder for the Bureau of Justice Edwin Bryan Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program Award. Item 8G is funding recommendations for the Fall River Senior Housing Development and 2 additional 2017 CDBG block grant programs. This is a 2-part item. The first is the 2017 CDBG Home Program and Affordable Housing Fund recommendation. And then item 8G2 is resolution 2017-86, authorizing the assignment of the city's private activity bond allocation for 2017 to the Longmont Housing Authority, providing other details in connection therewith and providing an effective date. Staff has not indicated they need to pull anything at this time.
Councilmember Finley.
I would move the consent agenda.
It's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. And that passes 6-0.
Mayor Coombs, your first item on second reading and public hearings is ordinance 2017-44, the bill for an ordinance amending sections 4.79.020 and 14.32.150 of the Longmont Municipal Code on electric community investment fees. And Matt Sheppers is here to make a presentation on this item.
Mayor Coombs, members of the council, Matt Sheppers, the Director of Electric and Broadband Operations for your Power and Communication Department. The item before you this evening is proposing to increase the electric community investment fee. This fee is only charged to developers during the building permit process. The fee was established in 1994 with the philosophy of developers pay its way. The funds that are collected by this fee are used to increase the capacity of the electric distribution network to support new development. With this fee, electric rates have not been impacted since the electrical ratepayers are not financially burdened to support new growth or construction costs to expand the electrical network. The fee that is charged to the developers is proportional to the electrical demand that they're adding to the system, and the adjustment in the fee is required due to an increase in construction cost of electrical infrastructure. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you can still ask questions before I move it. Okay. I guess no one has any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to hear or speak on ordinance 2017-44? I guess seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing on ordinance 2017-44. Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. In general, I think development needs to pay its own way, and so therefore I move that we pass ordinance 2017-44.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Bagley and seconded by Councilmember Moore. Let's vote. Passes 6-0.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is the Irwin Thomas 1 and 2 annexations. There's several items associated with this, so I'll read those legal documents into the record, and then Ava will have a short presentation. The first is Resolution 2017-87, finding parcels of land known as the Irwin Thomas Annexation Number 1, generally located south of the St. Vrain Creek, north of Quail Road, west of 119th Street, and east of Martin Street, eligible for annexation. Second is Resolution 2017-88, finding parcels of land known as the Irwin Thomas Annexation Number 2, generally located north of St. Vrain Creek, south of Sugar Mill Road, and west of 119th Street, eligible for annexation. The third item is Ordinance 2017-49, conditionally approving the Irwin Thomas Number 1 annexation, concept plan for gravel mining, land use amendment, and zoning the property PUD, MUD. The fourth item is Ordinance 2017-50, conditionally approving the Irwin Thomas Number 2 annexation, the concept plan for gravel mining and zoning the property PUD, MU. And the fifth item is Ordinance 2017-51, a bill for an ordinance approving a land use amendment to the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan for the Irwin Thomas Annexation 1, which is, we've already read the general location. So Ava has a short presentation on this.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Ava Pehejevsky, Planning and Development Services. You have a number of items, as you know, in front of you. This is, I'm kicking off the first part of multiple annexations, which we'll call the Golden's annexations, but we've broken them up because geographically they're in different locations, but it encompasses a total of about 670 acres total between myself and Don's annexation. So I'm going to kick off the Irwin Thomas one. So this is some background on it. Is laser pointer work on this? No, that's right. Use the mouse. Okay. So again, this is a total of 214 acres on the south, and this would be obviously Camp Pratt Boulevard. This is 119th Street on the east. This is Quail Road, and this is what would be the Martin Street extension. And so the first part, Irwin Thomas Annexation 1, encompasses all of this agricultural land in here south of Camp Pratt and north of Quail Road, and 31 acres north of the highway, but south of St. Vrain Creek. Irwin Thomas Number 2 is this portion, this 38 acres north of the creek around the railroad tracks. The zoning is a little bit different. This portion by the tracks is in Boulder County zoned industrial, general industrial, while this portion, the remainder, is zoned ag. This property is adjacent to the Resilient St. Vrain project, and so annexation of all of these annexations that are coming before you tonight helps us facilitate the permitting process to get it done through the City of Longmont. The southern half here has historically been used for agricultural activities. Back in 1995, the property owner received a special use permit for gravel mining. The owner was looking to continue that use. We didn't have a gravel mining use in our zoning code, so in 2015, City Council allowed gravel mining in a PUD mixed use zone, so that is what is being requested. So again, this is Irwin Thomas 1. It's going to be, or they're requesting some parks and greenway on the north end, economic development here, single family here, and mixed residential here on the west. There's also a comp plan amendment request. The part south of the highway is a mixed neighborhood right now on the comp plan. They would like to do an industrial economic development area here, single family here, and then continue that mixed neighborhood over here adjacent to Martin Street. Annexation Number 2, again, is north of the creek by the railroad tracks. They're looking at doing the city's piece of land here as Parks Greenway open space and industrial here on the north. Planning Commission recommended approval of both annexations as well as the land use amendment. They also approved a PUD for gravel mining with conditions. And so the PUD would approve gravel mining and reclamation, and then any future land development would have to go back through the public planning process. So that's what staff has is just a general overview. Barb Brunk from Resource Conservation Partners is also here tonight to speak on behalf of the applicant, and then we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's in the folder. Karen? I do, but I put. There it is. Erwin Thomas. Technology impaired. Thank you for bearing with us. Mayor, council members, I'm Barb Brunk with Resource Conservation Partners, P.O. Box 1522, Longmont, Colorado, here on behalf of the Golden family. Reggie Golden is also here this evening representing the family. As Ava said, this is two annexations that one is south of the river and the other is north of the river. The landowners are both the city of Longmont and the Golden family, so I'm kind of have my representing the city hat on this evening as well as part of this process. Ava went through the location. This is a picture of the aerial of where you are in the world, and this is the land ownership. So this is RLSJ, which is a Golden family partnership, the city, and then Golden Farm. This is how it fits into the land use in the city. So this up here is that mixed-use employment and the parks, greenway, and open space. And this is the piece that we've requested the land use amendment for. Two annexations here, 214 acres of Golden ground and 31 acres of city property. This is annexation number 1. This is the phased development of the property, and the concept plan contemplated first mining, then reclaiming, and then developing the property. And as Ava said, that we've put a PUD together that talks about the gravel mining, but any further development on the property will require another trip through the process and review and approval through the standard Longmont Development Code process. Envision Longmont Land Use Amendment, and the concept of having mixed-use employment along this edge was to buffer any residential development from the highway. When you're out on Highway 119, you know, the grade comes up here, so this is a little lower and isn't as impacted by the immediately adjacent to the highway, so that's kind of how we picked having the mixed-use employment adjacent to the highway to act as a buffer between the residential neighborhood. We also looked at these rural residential neighborhood here, putting more of the single family behind them as opposed to the mixed neighborhood, so it would be a transition away from them into the city. The neighbors and I have had a long relationship. We've been talking about this gravel mining and this application for many years. And the one thing that I always bring their voice into the room is they're concerned about the traffic on Quail Road. So some of them may not be here this evening, but I always tell them that I would put that voice into the room. This process accommodates for it, and they've been in communication with city staff about their concerns. Again, here's the land use. So that's that mixed employment. Here's the single family neighborhood, the mixed neighborhood, and the parks, greenway, and open space. Annexation number 2, pretty much half city and half the Golden family. Same thing with the first mine it, then reclaim it, then develop it, back through the process. That's my 10-cent story. We believe that the applications meet the criteria, both the statutory criteria and the City of Longmont land use criteria for annexation, zoning, and Envision Longmont land use amendment. We want to commend staff and all their efforts to help us comply with the code and work through the process. And it's interesting that here we are, almost to the day, the anniversary of the flood, here talking about annexations that will help implement the plan that the city has been working on for resilience and grain. So with that, I'll sit down and we're here to answer questions.
Does anybody have any questions before we open up the public hearing? Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Did I see that correctly, that gravel mining will be done on the city property?
Yes. At the time that the city acquired that property, it was conditioned upon the gravel mining, both north of the creek and south of the creek, because the gravel permit was already in place with Boulder County. So the concept there is to mine and reclaim the site. It's always been to widen the river corridor, so we see the mining and reclamation as a way to enhance the habitat. And the city property, this owns property on both sides of the corridor. So when it's mined and reclaimed, it'll actually widen out that corridor and enhance the habitat.
Is the city receiving any compensation for the gravel removed?
No. Again, when the city acquired the property, it was subject to having the lease, another operator who leased the property, and they are mining it, and the family retains the royalties on the gravel mining.
It's kind of like keeping city land that already has leases for oil kind of thing, right? Essentially.
Right, they had the royalties for the gravel,
Okay.
and they kept it when it was purchased.
All right. I'll now open up the public hearing on. Yeah, I'm going to open up the public hearing on resolution 2017-87, 88, and ordinances 2017-49, 50, and 51. Is there any in the audience who wish to speak at this time? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Councilmember Bailey.
Do we need to go one by one?
One by one, yes.
Okay, I move resolution 2017-87.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Santos absent.
Anybody else want to do this? I'm just going to go through it. All right. I move resolution 2017-88.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 6-0.
I move ordinance 2017-49.
All right, I guess that one got seconded by Bonnie. Let's vote.
And now I know how Councilmember Gabe Santos feels, just doing all the work. I move ordinance 2017-50.
So we got to vote again. And that passes 6-0.
And then finally, I move ordinance 2017-51.
All right, it's been moved and seconded by Councilmember Moore. Let's vote. And we're still waiting for one vote. We get to re-vote.
You'll have to, just a second, I have to let technology catch up, just a minute. Try it now, for those that haven't.
All right, that passes 6-0.
There's worse things that you got confused.
Okay. Mayor Coombs, your next item is another group of annexations, and there are several documents. I'll read the titles, and then Don will have a presentation. These are the Neighbors Redmond South Flatland Annexation Phases 1, 2, and 3. The first is a resolution 2017-89, finding a parcel of land known as the Neighbors Redmond South Flatlands Phase 1 Annexation, generally located in the west half of the northwest quarter and the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 5, along with part of the east half of the northeast quarter and the northeast quarter of Section 6, all in Township 2 North, Range 69, west of the 6th Principal Meridian, County of Boulder, State of Colorado, eligible for annexation. Resolution R 2017-90, finding a parcel of land known as Neighbors Redmond South Flatlands Phase 2 Annexation, eligible for annexation. This is generally located in part of the northeast quarter, southeast quarter of the east half of the southwest quarter, and the east half of the northwest quarter of Section 5, Township 2 North, Range 69, west of the 6th Principal Meridian. Resolution 2017-91, finding a parcel of land known as the Neighbors Redmond South Flatlands Phase 3 Annexation, eligible for annexation. This is generally located in this part of the southeast quarter and the east half of the southwest quarter of Section 5, Township 2 North, Range 69 west of the 6th Principal Meridian. Then there are the annexation ordinances. O 2017-52, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the neighbors Redmond South Flatlands Phase 1 annexation, same location as I read previously, and zoning the property A, agriculture, and E1, estate residential. The next one is ordinance 2017-53, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the neighbors Redmond South Flatlands Phase 2 annexation and zoning the property A, agriculture, and E1, estate residential. Ordinance 2017-54 is a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the neighbors Redmond South Flatlands Phase 3 annexation and zoning the property R1 residential low density and R2 medium density residential. And the last one is ordinance 2017-55, which is a bill for an ordinance approving the land use amendment to the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan for South Flatlands, generally located in part of the southeast quarter and the east half of the southwest quarter of Section 5, Township 2 North, Range 69 west of the 6th Principal Meridian. And Don hopefully will show you where those are located rather than by legal.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. Don Burchell, Planning and Development Services. As Valerie indicated, we have a number of items here to talk about really quickly regarding the neighbors Redmond South Flatland annexations, phases 1, 2, and 3. The thing to keep in mind is ultimately at the end of this presentation and after you go through your public hearing, you're going to be looking again at the resolutions for statutory compliance, similar to what you just did before with the Irwin-Thomas, and then you'll have 4 ordinances that you'll need to consider, 3 for annexation, 1 for a land use amendment. With me tonight, also in the audience tonight to answer any questions, I also have Nick Wolfram, the Director of Engineering Services with me, Chris Huffer, the Engineering Administrator, Tyler Stamey, Senior Civil Engineer, and then Steve Ransweiler, Senior Project Manager with Natural Resources. So we'll have the Public Works Natural Resources staff here as well if you have any questions related to impacts with the annexation. So again, as Valerie said, we're looking at annexation zoning concept plan of 396 acres, along with a land use amendment to the Envision Longmont document, which is approximately covers 167 acres. The map on the screen shows how the individual phases for this annexation extend across the city. North is to the top of the screen. To the left-hand side of the screen, we have Phase 1 annexation, which starts at the intersection of Airport Road and 9th Avenue. Airport Road is the road that's on the far left-hand side of the screen and extends all the way over to Hover and Rogers Road, which is down in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. The reason that we have to do this in a phased annexation is that by state statute requirements, we have to have a certain amount of contiguity for the property to be annexed into the city. So the way that this is structured is that the contiguity builds as you move, and it allows for the areas to be annexed and brought into the city. So the phases themselves, I'm going to reference through the presentation as Phase 1, which is the orange, Phase 2, which is the purple, and then Phase 3, which is the blue on the screen. Phase 1, this is a close-up of an aerial of the area that shows in red the outline of the property border. Again, 9th Avenue is up along the north side of the property with the Airport Road on the left-hand side. You can also see the Vance Brand Airport down in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. The concept plan is shown on the screen for this property. The annexation includes 229 acres of property. The property, again, is to be zoned agricultural. 179 acres of it will be zoned as ag, with 50 acres, which is shown in kind of a light yellow on the screen, as estate residential. The uses that are proposed include public-private open space, rural neighborhood, cluster lot subdivision, and then agricultural uses would be allowed. Phase 2, again outlined in red, showing the area that's being annexed. This includes a portion of the city's Lichen Gulch Channel, which is in the upper left-hand side of this annexation. The property was split when we built Lichens Gulch a number of years ago, and this allows for the annexation of the parcels as well as the city's parcel that we acquired. The concept plan, which is up on the screen, shows the area that's going to be annexed is 84 acres in size. It shows the proposed land uses and then the zoning that is requested. Again, we have some agricultural areas that are in the green, estate 1 residential in the yellow, the R1 low density residential, then R2 medium density, which is kind of an orangish pink on the screen. Phase 3 is also now up on the screen. Again, goes down to the intersection of Rogers Road and Hover Road. The property itself is 83 acres in size. The zoning, again, to correlate to the colors, would be the agricultural, the estate, the low density residential, and the medium density. Again, the uses would correlate to the zoning that are proposed on the property. The land use amendment, which was discussed just really quickly to start the presentation, the land use amendment itself affects phases 2 and 3 of the annexation. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the existing Longmont area comprehensive plan found in the Envision document. The red outline identifies the area that is proposed for changes. So as you can see on the left, there are areas of parked greenway and open space, as well as the what would correlate to high density residential at the corner of Hover and Rogers Road, as well as some commercial development that could happen. Those are proposed to be changed. And in their place, they're adding some additional low density residential. They're adding some basically medium density residential development and some additional what would be a correlate to a very low density residential. As part of this process, the city does require, with annexation, going through neighborhood meetings and public information to be put out so that the neighbors are aware of what's going on through the development process. With this process, this application went through 2 neighborhood meetings, went through our development review process. We gave notices of the application when it was turned in. We gave notices of the public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as notices that went out for the meeting that you're holding tonight. Through all of those notices and through discussions with the neighbors, I've identified up on the screen the items that were noted by the neighbors during discussions with me or through email or through just general contact about the concerns with this annexation. And I'm going to briefly go through and just talk about those. So the first was the airport influence zone. This property is located, all phases are located within the airport influence zone. That is the area that surrounds the city of Longmont's airport and has specific regulations that restrict the development of the property in that section of our land development code. In the annexation agreements, we also have included language that's required for the purchasers of property to be notified that they are within that airport influence zone. And then the other thing that was negotiated between the airport manager and the property owners was that the property owners agreed to specifically give the city a navigation easement over and across all of these properties, which is not a requirement of the city of Longmont. But they entered into that and they have agreed to record that if the property is annexed into the city of Longmont to again address the issues of the airport influence zone and any impacts on future people that may live in this area that are near the airport. Other neighborhood concerns were the proposed land uses and densities of the area, as well as the loss of open space. Again, on the screen you have the, what I would say, the kind of the before and after proposal. So the current Envision document is on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is the proposed changes to it. So some of the concerns that were expressed during the neighborhood meeting originally when this project started was the proposal that we have high density residential on the corner of Rogers Road and Hover. The applicant considered that, has proposed to change that to what would correlate to a medium density residential in its place, as well as removing some of the commercial that is allowed just north of the multifamily area or the high density area, changing those to be more of a medium density residential to correlate. And then They are also showing the removal of some of the areas that are Parks Greenway open space, which would correlate to the areas around the ponds, and showing those as low-density residential. And then also removing some of the Parks Greenway and open space and expanding this would be a very low-density residential development to the south. So there is shown a loss of open space area on the plan. There is some changes in density. Some of it has been a way to shift and to accommodate for the removal of the high-density residential at the corner of Rogers and
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I just want to make sure that we're all understanding what you mean by open space. That is not currently owned by the city as open space. It's not owned by Boulder County as open space. We have it on our plan saying, man, that'd be really cool someday if we owned that and made it open space.
Councilmember Bagley, you're correct. And to truly clarify my statement, it's identified as Parks, Greenway, and open space.
Okay.
So that designation, when we were looking at the properties up in the Phase 1 area, that correlated to an agricultural zone being applied to those properties, not open space. It is not reserved or undevelopable. It is just developable at a less intense rate. So yeah, thank you for the clarification. Other concerns that were expressed were regarding traffic impacts, access, and then widening not only of 9th Avenue, Rogers Road, but then also impacts on Hover Street with the future development. Again, our comprehensive plan has identified the need for these roads in the future to be expanded. They've been accommodated and have been looked at with projections for future development when we've adopted our comprehensive plan for what those streets are going to look like. An example of how Rogers Road could be developed in the future, which was presented to the Planning Commission, is that instead of doing a typical section, it would be could be more of a rural section, which would still allow for wider shoulders for bike lanes as well as the necessary travel lanes, accommodating a sidewalk on one side, possibly on the second if it's deemed that it's necessary, but that would fit within the existing 60-foot right-of-way that's out there on that street currently.
Councilmember Christensen?
I'm trying to imagine how you would widen Rogers Road unless you did it on the north side. Because the south side, it comes very, very close to people's houses in many cases. And
Don't we still own the right-of-ways?
So by annexing, we would pick up the 60-foot right-of-way for portions of Rogers Road, assuming that another annexation that will be coming up to council here shortly is annexed. It would pick up the remaining portions of Rogers Road. The existing right-of-way is 60 feet, so that is existing right-of-way owned by the county that if the city annexes will become city right-of-way, which would accommodate the section that I'm showing here.
so you would be widening it from the center, not from the part annexed would be to the north, wouldn't it?
So I don't know that we have in the materials tonight a drawing that's going to show you exactly how that would lay out with the existing conditions. Nick and Chris are here who might be able to give you and clarify a little bit better for you, and maybe we can bring them up after I finish the presentation.
Okay.
So the other items that we discussed actually 3 weeks ago on first reading when this came up was the drainage and floodplain issues, the St. Vrain River split flows, and the filling of the gravel ponds. So at the meeting 3 weeks ago during first reading when this came up, we pulled off consent. We again talked about the existing floodplain, what is the mapped flood areas from the flood that we experienced, and then we talked about the split flow design that has been in a preliminary design at this point with Public Works through their process of going through and trying to determine how to address the concerns after the flood. And then the last thing that I would say is that, again, Nick is here again tonight. He can go through this again if you have concerns. And we talked also about the need, or whether or not we need to fill all of the gravel ponds, or whether or not we would need to only fill a portion of those. So the applicant may want to speak to that, as well as Nick, if you have additional questions on that. Finally, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed all of these requests. As you can see, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 annexations. Those were voted 7-0, 6-1, and 7-0. But the land use amendment was recommended for approval, but it was a 4-3 vote. So again, tonight, what we need council ultimately to make decisions on is whether or not the 3 resolutions of statutory compliance should be approved, finding that the annexation is eligible for annexation and meets the statutory requirements. Second is to consider the 3 annexation ordinances and determine whether or not you wish to annex this property into the city. And then the third is to consider the amendment to the Envision Longmont plan, which would make the land use amendments that we talked about in the presentation. And that is my presentation.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I have some questions about the annexation, and it is about the RSVP Resilient St. Vrain project, because since I've been on council, I've been to so many meetings about the big projects, the split flow versus filling in the ponds, and it's been presented to council numerous times. But my question is, the concept plan shows the gravel pits being filled in. I'm sorry, the ponds being filled on their concept plan. But when we go to 4.2.3 on the annexation, it says preliminary plans for improvements have been identified and are shown on Exhibit D to this agreement. Exhibit D shows 2 plans. One of them is the split flow, and the other one is the gravel ponds being filled in. I keep saying gravel ponds. I guess they are being filled in. So my question is, what is this? Which one of these is the city doing for the Resilient St. Vrain project? Because both of them are shown, and the concept plan shows the ponds being filled in.
Good evening, Mayor Coombs, members of council. My name is Nick Wolfram. I'm the Director of Civil Engineering with the Public Works and Natural Resources, and I've been working on the Resilient St. Vrain project. I believe the graphics we're talking about are the 2 graphics shown as Exhibit D.
Yes.
And what those 2 graphics show are actually both of the options for this reach of the Resilient St. Vrain. The first one is what's called the single thread, wherein you would widen out the existing channel. The second one is what we call the split flow. And what I want to be clear on with the split flow is there are several opportunities on how you would construct that. And we're at a conceptual design only. And so as you move forward with this, as the project moves upstream and you move into a final design, that's when some of those decisions would be reached. When we talk about filling the ponds, there are a couple of different ways you could create this. One of the options that we talked about was filling either partially filling some of the ponds. That's never been finalized by any of this. Only is really a place to dispose of material on site so that you're not having the added costs of, as you excavate a channel, having to haul that material away. So it was where and how can you dispose of that material on site? And so that was one of the options that we discussed with them. What's going to happen is that's going to be determined at the time of final design of the project as it moves forward, and whether or not that's an option that they're going to want to move forward and pursue and try and find a balanced approach to that.
So all of the presentations that we had about this part of the St. Vrain project have shown us the split flow. So I had assumed over the past 18 months that that was what we were going to do. So saying that we will discuss this later, did not the city already decide we were going to do?
That is the preferred alternative, and everything that we've said and done has said that is where we are, but we have not gotten to the final design yet, and so we left both options open in this annexation agreement. But ultimately, council controls that because council would approve the capital improvement program. And I can say, yes, staff has said all along that our preferred alternative is the split flow. That does not necessarily mean, though, that you have to fill all of the ponds in order to do that. That's how you dispose of that material is an option that you still look at in the design process and what works for the development of the property as well as the project.
So my concern still is that the concept plan does not show the split flow. And if it doesn't show that, and it shows that these ponds are filled, does that not impact the people on Rogers Road as far as the water table, the aquifers? Has that been discussed?
You're talking about groundwater there. What we're talking about is floodwater. And the split flow alternative is this alternative, which is included in Exhibit D. So it is there as far as, and the wording in the annexation agreement states that they will give us the owner agrees to dedicate easements at the time of platting or upon request of the city as determined by the city to be necessary for the construction of a resilient St. Vrain improvements associated with a Holver Street box culvert and a channel that will pass split flows through the property or any other St. Vrain improvements to carry 100-year flows.
So this gives us total control.
It gave us total control of the option for final design because we're not at that level yet. But you're exactly correct, Councilmember Peck, that we have always said that our preferred alternative is the split flow alternative.
So my preferred passage of this annexation is to put an amendment in there saying that we would be committed to the split flow per the Resilient St. Vrain project, so that, because I don't see a commitment here. I see a discussion, but I don't see a commitment.
Commitment is that we had not finished the final design and gotten to that level of design yet. So that there is a commitment on behalf of the property owner to give the city the easements necessary for any of those alternatives that we would have, and it leaves the flexibility in the terms of the city to get through the design process and determine what the best design for the city is.
But what if the landowners change their mind? And
we have control of that, though, is what he's saying.
The annexation agreement signed and executed by the city and the property owner commits them to doing that. That's the section that I just read.
Would anybody have a problem on council with an amendment as a commitment? I've seen plans come and go and they change. So, well, I'm going to make the amendment and it can be voted however you want. But, so I pass the...
we can't do that till we have a public hearing.
Oh, that's okay. That's right. Okay.
Councilmember Christensen.
Nick, wait a minute. Okay, I think one of the things that we're concerned about, is that the people on Rogers Road who are already running sump pumps all the time not have worse problems. So if we did wind up filling in parts of those ponds, in your experience, would that create more of a problem for them?
We haven't looked at the groundwater, and that would be something that we would look at as the design of the process moves forward.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether all of those are lined or not. They're not lined ponds, so, they're just accepting groundwater.
Okay.
Whether that's filled or not, I don't think is going to
Okay.
change the surrounding area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I will now open up the public hearing on Resolution 2017-89 and 91. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak? Yeah, I think I've got Carol Moore and Steve Allen and Gail Allen.
Go ahead. You're up there. Go ahead. I'll speak next.
Okay. Steve Allen, 1127 Twin Peaks Circle. If we have learned nothing from the flooding in Houston, allowing builders to pave over all of the city's agricultural and open lands is a disaster waiting to happen. Our drainage basin and our floodplain along the St. Vrain River should be coveted and protected from the blind pursuit of builders out to make a buck. We have enough low, middle, and upper income housing currently being built in Longmont. We don't need to add another parcel to that lays barely out of the St. Vrain floodplain to this building frenzy. Therefore, I strongly encourage you not to rezone this property at Airport and 9th Road and what is defined here as clustered density housing. Leave it as what was originally planned, to be open space and light use agricultural. Thank you.
Carol Moore.
Carol Moore, 9345 Rogers Road. I've owned that property for over 30 years. In reference to your question, at 18 inches you hit rock, at about 4 feet, depending on the time of the year, you start hitting groundwater. I've been to all the planning meetings on this project. I have no problem with annexation and the development of that area. I just want to be considered, because my property drains to the northeast. It goes into the existing irrigation ditch, under Golden Road through the culvert, and into the existing main irrigation flow. So at what point during this development is an engineer going to come to me and discuss what my property does? Because I've been there a long time, I know. We all know what happened to the flood out there. There was water in the Home Depot parking lot. And 30 years ago, there wasn't a water problem out there because all this land was irrigation. There wasn't a Home Depot, there wasn't a Target, and the land took care of the water problems. Since the development has started, the south side of Rogers Road, you're correct. There's a sump pump going all the time, constantly. I don't understand what they said earlier about the widening of Rogers Road when this annexation is to the north of Rogers Road. Rogers Road, as my understanding, is not in this annexation. So how are you going to widen that to allow more access? I just don't understand that. I'm in the easternmost portion of the Rogers Road development, and so this development is going to border my property. No one has said anything or addressed what type of buffer this development is going to create for me. In 30 years, I've had a half dozen neighbors. I've had wildlife, views of Long's Peak, 100-year-old cottonwoods. Now you're telling me we're going to have medium, low density. I have one house on 2 acres. Low density is 6 houses on each acre. Golden Road has been there since the beginning of this development and was originally scheduled to be access. That was changed due to the community. I'm out of time.
So, sorry, Gail Ellen?
Gail Allen, 11, 27 Twin Peaks Circle. I too am concerned about the Redmond, neighbors Redmond annexation and the change to the land use code. I'm talking about at the 9th and Airport location, the changes to medium and possibly cluster density. You're going to reduce rural neighborhoods, parks, greenways, and open space from 100 acres to 41 acres, if I read it right, and replace this with houses. My concerns are, 1, the St. Vrain runs through the properties. Number 2, I've gone to the Resilient St. Vrain different meetings, and it is, this area is one of the last on the list for flood remediation or reparation, and it currently is unfunded. So I don't know how you're going to build something first and address this later. There are also several ponds on this property. If we reduce parks, greenways, we drain and fill ponds, how can this in any way be good with regards to mitigating any future flooding? Grass absorbs water, cement does not. This is an important river corridor. I live near the 9th and Airport. People at 9th and Airport, the Greens, Mountain View, we were flooded severely in 2013, and we look to you, City Council, to make wise land use and zone decisions to best protect your citizens and our homes. The city is building at a very rapid rate. I see what's going on at the Clover Basin area and Airport. The houses, there are currently houses being built at Hover and 9th. This will increase traffic, congestion, not to mention destroy all the beautiful views of the Front Range, which will disappear in that Hover and 9th right now. So right down the street from Hover and 9th, you want to build even more housing at Airport and 9th. It sounds like 153 to 537 more housing units in this Redmond area. 9th Street will be impossible to travel on, just like the upcoming traffic congestion that was talked about at that Clover Basin. Lastly, we really don't have a park in this area, and it sure would be nice to use some of this open space and where it is the way it was originally planned for parks, so everyone can enjoy it, and also functionally to prevent future flooding. Please, City Council, think long and hard about this annexation and the change of the land use code. Leave us open space, leave us parks, so we don't experience any more unexpected flooding. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that'd like to speak?
Good evening, Mayor Coombs, members of council. My name is Kim Gibbs. I live at 7468 Mount Sherman Road in Gun Barrel. I had not planned to speak tonight, but your staff member here said the phrase, navigation easement, and I cannot let that go without a response. I'll start with a little blurb from today's newspaper. 19-year-old Frederick man was issued a summons for having an altered exhaust system on his vehicle in blah blah Liley Avenue. The report stems from ongoing issues of excessive neighborhood noise. Now, we've got a Boulder County noise ordinance where I live. There's a noise ordinance here. We can solve the problem of barking dogs and things like that. But the biggest barking dog in all of North Boulder County is called Mile High Skydiving, and you don't seem to be able to rein anything in with that. It is a terrible nuisance. And when I hear your staff member concocting a plan with the airport manager, David Slater, to record navigation easements for this parcel as a condition of annexation. I am furious for all the Longmonters. It is trampling the rights of ordinary citizens instead of solving this very serious noise problem that's coming from your airport, 264 acres of prime real estate being run by a group of lawless cowboy pilots and a carnival ride over our homes, if you've noticed the last few weekends. Find a way to manage that airport responsibly. Disentangle yourself from those FAA onerous grants that prevent you from adopting any reasonable regulations out there, like curfews. Do not trample the rights of ordinary citizens. And that's what navigation easements do. They take away the rights of anyone who would live there later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on ordinance or resolution 2017-88 and 91. Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. So, quick question. So, clarification. So, Section 1, A, B, and C is annexing these parcels in, right? And then Section 2, A, B, and C is designating the zoning, right? At least that's what the packet says.
You say A, B, and C.
So what I'm saying is, what we're talking about now is just annexing these properties in. And then the resolution, or that's the resolution. And the ordinances establish the zoning.
No.
No? Then clarify for me.
Okay. So, under item C, number 1, A, B, and C, make a finding that the properties meet the state statute requirements for annexation and that you can annex them.
Right.
It does not annex them. It just says that you could.
Correct, yeah. But what I'm saying is that what we're voting on now says we can, but it doesn't.
It doesn't obligate you to do it. It just says, could we?
We could.
Correct.
Right? Okay,
Correct.
so doing this is basically, this vote means
Means a lot to the
they're
state.
eligible. We're just
Means a
saying,
lot to the
okay, we'll
state.
think
They
about
don't
it in
care.
5 minutes. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And I misspoke. I said that we actually closed the hearing on resolutions 2017, 89, 90, and 91. Just for clarification. Councilmember Peck.
Can we do these in a batch, or do we need to do them individually?
We have to do them individually.
Okay. I move ordinance R2-1789.
All right. Been moved and seconded. Let's vote on. So we're voting on resolution 2017-89. It's been moved by Councilmember Peck and seconded by Councilmember Finley. Let's vote. It's 89. We need one more vote. Okay, that passes 6-0. Councilmember Peck?
I move R2017-90.
It's been moved by Councilmember Peck and seconded by Councilmember Finley. Let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Santos absent. Councilmember Peck?
I move R2017-91.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Passes 6-0. Councilmember Santos absent. Councilmember Christensen. Okay. Okay, I guess we're now ready to move on to the ordinances. Councilmember Peck.
I move ordinance 0-2017-52 with an amendment. And I move that the neighbors Redmond amend the annexation request to commit to the split flow plan per the RSVP, Resilient St. Vrain project.
Okay, do we have a second for that? Okay, I guess it was because there was no second.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, so we've got amendment, it's been seconded. Let's vote on. Yes, Councilmember.
I'm sorry, I was checking something else in the packet. Can you just restate the amendment? What are we doing before we vote?
Do you want to restate your?
Sure. The amendment is that the neighbors Redmond, I amend the annexation to the neighbors Redmond request on 0-2-17-52 to commit to the split flow plan per the RSVP.
Okay. You know, since the detailed design is not done, and during the design, I always like to leave all my options open until the final design's open. So, I mean, I'm for the split flow, but I'm not going to vote for this. So let's go ahead and vote. Yeah, let's do the amendment. Yeah, just the amendment. Okay, and that fails 2-4 with Councilmember Moore, Bagley, Mayor Coombs, and Bonnie, Councilmember Finley descending, and Councilmember Santos absent. Councilmember Christensen.
Earlier, we annexed 245 acres that had previously been used for city land, greenway, and previously agricultural land. And now we're talking about annexing an additional 400 acres. Huge, all in one night. It's a huge amount of land for us to annex and take out of agricultural production when we haven't really even got the money to work on the flood mitigation yet. I think we need to table this until we've worked on the flood mitigation a little more and until we've got our land development code fixed. And I'm not going to be voting for these because I don't want to see people getting flooded. Thank you.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I move ordinance 2017-52.
Second.
All right, let's vote on that. Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess my question is, at this point, all we're doing is we're annexing it into the city. We're establishing this particular parcel as A, agriculture, and E1 is state residential. So like the most extreme lowest of densities, correct? And with this, they will now have a use by right, and they can either do agricultural or state residential, and they don't need to come back. But they do have to get approval and whatnot through planning and zoning, but as long as they meet the criteria in our ordinances, they can build that. That's correct. All right. Thank you.
Okay, we had a motion, it's been seconded, let's vote. And that passes 5-1 with Councilmember Christensen dissenting and Councilmember Santos absent. Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I move ordinance 2017-53.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Do you want to turn off your mic, please? Councilmember Peck?
I would like to make a friendly amendment to it, to 2017-53, to amend the annexation request to commit to the split flow plan per the Resilient St. Vrain project.
Okay, but we've already got the ordinance. It's been, so she can't add an amendment after we've already had a motion and a second. Councilmember Bagley?
She can, it's just not friendly. So there's a motion and a second, technically we should vote.
Correct. You can't amend. A friendly would just be accepted, and you vote on the main motion. With a motion to amend, you just vote on the motion to amend.
Okay, so we're going to just vote on the motion now, and then we'll vote on the amendment first. Okay. Okay, so we're just voting on the amendment. Okay, let's vote. And that fails 2-4 with Councilmember Moore, Councilmember Bagley, Mayor Coombs, and Councilmember Finley dissenting, and Councilmember Santos absent. Okay, now let's vote on the amendment.
Mayor Coombs.
Excuse me, on the motion.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. And I don't disagree with you on the split flow. I just, like Mayor Coombs said, just when Nick Wolfram and our experts come back, I just presume they're going to do what's best. We'll get the information, and then we can decide then. So this, for me, is not necessarily against the split flow. I just don't want to legislate from the
It's how, you know, my thoughts are, let the experts do the design and bring back the best design. We think it's going to, and then we'll figure it out at that point. Okay, so let's vote on the ordinance 2017-53. And that passes 4-2 with Councilmember Christensen, Councilmember Peck dissenting, Councilmember Santos absent. Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I move ordinance 2017-54.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Okay, Councilmember Peck?
I have an amendment. I move that the neighbor Redmond amend the annexation request to commit to the split flow plan per the RSVP.
Okay, let's vote on the amendment first. Councilmember Bagley?
No.
Okay. And the amendment fails to pass with Councilmember Moore, Councilmember Bagley, Mayor Coombs, and Councilmember Finley dissenting, and Councilmember Santos absent. Okay, now Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'm gonna miss saying that. I guess my question is, so now that this is that we're about to vote, and it's going to be, if it's annexed into the city, it's going to be R1 and R2. And so in the future, in order to build, they're going to need to go to P&Z and prepare plans and work with the neighbors, correct? And at that time, will they be permitted to build if it remains a floodplain?
Nick Wolfram. Any construction in the floodplain has to comply with both city and FEMA regulations, so they would have to deal with the floodplain before they would do construction in that area. I think there are some areas within this development, within this total annexation, that are outside of the floodplain. But any area within the floodplain would have to be dealt with prior to development.
And then this gentleman, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name, sir, but this gentleman who's borders the property and has been there for 30 years, yes, you, will there be an opportunity for drainage and whatnot and impact on surrounding lands? When will that occur?
As far as the development goes, they would have to ensure that their development does not create an adverse drainage impact on other properties.
Okay, and so tonight we are not talking about the specifics of the development, it's just the annexation.
Haven't done any of the public improvement design yet, no.
Okay, and then as far as the, and this is just a comment, which is, I think the difference between Ms. Gibbs' example, and I understand and have empathies for her frustration, we can, if we've got subject matter jurisdiction over someone who's speeding in town, whereas we don't when it comes to the airport. And the navigation easement is just putting people on notice that basically says, you live near an airport, and so if you're going to live there, heads up. And would certainly encourage people not to buy if they don't want to live by an airport. So,
Councilman Member Bagley, to stay up here, Nick, to put it to layman's terms, is the stormwater issues come into play when they come in for a permit based on the design that they're going to bring to the table. When they bring that design to the table, when he says they can't adversely impact, what it means is if there's water coming off of this property onto this property, you can't back it up on that property. And you can't release water from your property that is more than the, what's the term, Nick? Historic flows that leave the property. And so what you see in that, when you see development applications and folks talk to you about us saying, well, they're requiring retention, or they're doing this and they're doing that, similar to the conversation we had on the property north of 66, the reason we make those requirements is so we don't cause a problem on someone else's property. So that's more of a general explanation, non-engineered. I don't know if I got it all right or not.
Exactly. And once again, to complete the resilient St. Vrain with the option that we have as a preferred option of the split foot channel, that's what will take some of the surrounding property and probably equally or more importantly the downstream property between Hover and the railroad track south of the creek, all of that existing stuff out of the floodplain.
Okay, so essentially the neighbors are going to get neighbors, they're not going to get the neighbors' water.
Essentially.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we had a motion, it's been seconded. Let's vote on ordinance 54, excuse me. And that passes 4-2 with Councilmember Christensen, Councilmember Peck dissenting, and Councilmember Santos absent. So now we have ordinance 2017-55 to consider. Councilmember Finley.
I would move ordinance 2017-55.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. And that passes 5-1 with Councilmember Christensen dissenting. Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break.
Man, that was good pace though.
I do know the second part because I think it's You're taking me outside.
Go ahead, and then I'll catch her after you. There's a limitation.
I think they're about ready to we're going to have so I mean, just so you know, I just want you to be sure. But yeah, that's all. I just want to be sure we don't get them out of order. Not that it's a big thing.
No, I wanted to catch you really quickly. Yes. That's all right. I'm thinking fun.
Oh, that's what I mean, changing across the street.
Yes, it's all closed.
There's no conflict.
Okay, there is no comment. Of course, I mean, on the south side, when they talk about building the ponds, well, there's some islands. Okay, so which, what are we talking about? Sorry, you're way here.
Hey, how are you?
It's part of the discussion to fill, is if the city wants to do this PUD, it's south of Golden, over in Rogers, okay, Okay, not a problem. My neighbors are also going to ask me, well,
Short story. No problem. I'm in the old tribe. 62 next to Old Road. You got your first farmhouse. Yep. Okay, next house. And so when the gravel mining started, which was 5 pounds, the first day, it came right down from the road. The spotter called and said, "Hey, what are you doing? I'm noise, I'm dirt, I'm dust." He said, "Okay, I'll take care of it." So he shut down the operation. He built the road east of the Longmont. So he got this. And all I would like is consideration when you do this development, because if you landlock me, you flood me out. I know. Well, yeah. And originally,
Because I went, this was today I found out about this in the land use changes.
Right.
And I went and talked to someone because I couldn't figure out even where these places were when they say Meridian.
Right.
So I ran up there about 3 o'clock and talked to a really nice guy who works in the land use.
Right.
And he told me, no, you can't just annex something without it having defined as what you're going to do. So
It's just the zoning. So the thing is that, you've got estate, E1, and then you've got R1, R2, R3. R1's like a typical low-density neighborhood, single-family homes. R2 is like townhomes and a bunch of smaller homes on, and then R3 is like apartments. And then you've got commercial, business light industrial, heavy industrial.
But once you've zoned it, which you did for medium or low to medium density.
In a third of it, yeah.
Right, the one closest to me. But then that means that they can come in and do it. Like you said, well, we can choose what we want to do with them, and now you can't.
But the low and medium density rather than, I would be more concerned if I were you, if it was an R3, or if it was industrial, or business light industrial, and now all of a sudden, like, people can come in and just put
It
apartments.
could be like anywhere from, it went from like 100 and something to 500 and something. It's a lot. That's what I read. The residences can propose up to 530 something.
So right now, I voted against the last 3 apartments. City council right now is voting for apartments. I was just happy they didn't zone it in R3.
I don't know. That's why I was thinking, don't change the land use too much, because now that you've approved it, they'll come and build it. Because you can't say, no, you can't. You've approved it.
Correct, but that's going to happen. I mean, it's going to be built at some point. I mean, no, but people, our community, I mean, everyone in general recognizes that if you have property, you can put it to a use. If we want to keep it as open space, yeah, we can buy it and say this should be open space. But we've got a lot of open space out west, and right now all our open space dollars we have between here and Boulder.
Oh, you're talking about between here and Boulder?
Yeah. I mean, we've got.
I'm talking about in the city, or just parks and all that. So they took like from 100 acres of parks down to like 40 greenways.
Correct. And so right now, and we did that about 5
No,
years
just-
ago.
you just did
no.
this today.
What I'm saying is we changed.
Okay, can we take our seats, please?
But we can keep talking. Call me. If you actually look up online,
I was kind of
call me. We can get lunch.
Can we please take your seats and we can resume our meeting?
So they already own it, yeah. So you know, you get to maintain it, you get to take care of it. You think it's your front yard, the county already owns it.
Well, they need to come and read.
Can we please restart our meeting, please?
Tell them But, yeah, we're good to work.
Thanks a lot. I'll be a good neighbor.
City Attorney, I believe I may have made a procedural error and not have opened up the public hearing on ordinance 2017-55 at the same time I did 52, 53, and 54. So because of that, I think we need to potentially reconsider and re-vote on.
Yes, Mayor, my best recollection too is it went through 54. I don't have a clear recollection of it being, including ordinance 2755. To make sure that we do it right procedurally, I would recommend that somebody in the prevailing side move to reconsider ordinance 2017-55. That'll bring us back before the vote taken. You can open the public hearing at that point and then retake the vote on the ordinance.
Okay, Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I move to reconsider 2017-55.
All right, let's vote to reconsider. And that passes 5-1 with Councilmember Christensen dissenting. Okay, now I'm going to open up the public hearing on ordinance 2017-55. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this ordinance? I guess seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing on ordinance 2017-55. Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I move passage of 2017-55.
All right, let's vote. Councilmember Christensen, you need to vote. Okay. Okay, that passes 6-0 with Councilmember Santos absent. Okay, now we are moving on to ordinance 2017-56.
Mayor Coombs, this is a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 3.04 of the Longmont Municipal Code on personnel rules to implement changes presented by the Vacation Pathfinders report, and I believe Harold Dominguez is just going to summarize this.
Well, Mayor, I council, I was just going to say we have presented on this on a number of occasions, but in general, this is a compilation of the work that the Vacation Pathfinders talked to you about almost 6 months ago, I believe. We have Dan Kramer, who is an intricate part of that, in the audience, and we can answer any questions if you have them on this one.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for staff or Dan Kramer before I open up the public hearing? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing on ordinance 2017-56. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this ordinance? I guess seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing on ordinance 2017-56. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I would move passage of ordinance 2017-56.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. And that passes.
You already voted.
Yes, 6-0.
All right, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
I guess the one thing I wanted to bring up that just came to my mind is this applies. This only applies to non-fire and non-police employees, correct?
Yes and no. It applies to those folks that are not in the collective bargaining unit. There are fire and police employees that are outside of the collective bargaining unit. So
my question is, should we not also include our police and fire department in this?
So we have historically, well, what I was going to say is we have historically not included them in this. But in reviewing what we did with the day after Thanksgiving, we did that a little bit differently. What we did in that piece was we created the ordinance and we gave it to everyone, and then Eugene helped me. We had a separate ordinance or a resolution. A separate ordinance where we gave it to police and fire for a year, and then it was brought into the collective bargaining piece. Fire then brought it in, police didn't. And so that is a difference between this one and the day after Thanksgiving, in that we're not bringing it in for that shorter duration.
Should we not?
Ultimately, that's a question for council, because when you go in the collective bargaining processes, there's obviously conversations back and forth. They go in and they can negotiate more different raise structures and things, where we set those as we set those in our budget process for the rest of the organization. Ultimately, it is a policy decision that if council wants to, you all can include them in there. What I would actually recommend is that if council wants us to look at something like that, I would say that instead of bringing it in, you would direct us to engage in a conversation with them via the collective bargaining process to discuss these issues.
I move that we actually direct city staff to engage in a dialogue with our police and fire unions and engage in that collective bargaining process so that they have the opportunity to benefit from this policy that we just passed.
Don't they automatically do that anyway? I mean, do you need direction to do that? I thought you always engaged through the negotiations.
We do, but we don't have a process starting until next year.
Okay.
Whereas it's starting now for everyone else.
Okay.
This starts now.
This would actually just direct staff to engage in the discussion and give our
Okay. And so let me kind of talk about the ordinance. So part of how we had to structure this, if council will remember, part of what we were talking about in the vacation piece on this one was that we had to wait until HATS was up and running, because that's the new human resource system that we're using. In the current system, we really couldn't devote time to change the system and do it. We had to restructure this where we give it in increments of days to start off, because we couldn't have you vote on something that occurs in the future that really binds a future council. So this starts with an interim implementation step. And so that's what starts now.
Yeah. Okay, well, Councilmember Bagley made a motion, and did we get a second? I'll second council members. Councilmember Moore?
So what exactly are we talking about here? Because the collective bargaining arrangement this is all part of that, in my opinion. That's why we have the unions, that's why we have the collective bargaining agreement, so that they can hash out these details during negotiations. That's why we have collective bargaining. So it doesn't really, I guess I'm not real clear on what we're doing here, because it's, we're engaging in the conversation at the kind of time of collective bargaining, in my opinion, so.
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I mean, like in my office, every October, we do performance evaluations, and we do raises and bonuses, much like the city. But during the year, if something comes up, you don't necessarily have to say, well, you can wait. It's not October. So if I look at it as the only employees of the city are the police and fire department that have the collective bargaining process. And so we are giving this benefit to city employees, and I think that our police and fire department could benefit or should benefit from the same philosophy that we just passed. And so that the process for engaging them is not going to occur for some time, whereas if we tell city staff that they can kind of jump out of line and just say, talk to them, and who knows, maybe we might be able to get something for it. I think our police and fire department would benefit and appreciate this.
Okay, I guess we've had a motion, it's been seconded. Let's vote. And that passes 6-0 with Councilmember Santos dissenting. Okay, moving on to general business.
Here comes the first item of general business is an appeal of the Beckbar Dental Preliminary Final PUD Development Plan denial by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Karen Bryant is here to present this, and there are two resolutions for your consideration once you hear this presentation.
Mayor Coombs, council members, Karen Bryant, Planning and Development Services. So the item before you is an appeal of the Beckbar Dental Preliminary and Final PUD Development Plan with modifications denial by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Okay. So just real quick, the property is located along adjacent to 17th Avenue at 2120 17th Avenue. Hover is to the west, And then this green space area is Garden Acres Park. The proposal itself covers approximately 0.4 acres. It's to develop roughly 7,300 square foot dental and office building. The proposal does include a wind turbine, and the zoning on the property is planned unit development mixed use. The application that was submitted was a preliminary and final PUD development plan with 2 modifications to Section 1505 of the Land Development Code. Section 1505 deals with the development design standards, and Section 1503-060E-17A does allow for modifications to the standards if the property is zoned to PUD, which is the case. Real quick, the modifications are reduction in the buffers, both side yard buffers as well as the rear yard buffer, and then also a reduction in the number of required plantings as far as trees and shrubs are concerned. The review criteria for a preliminary and final PUD development plan are the common review criteria, and then there's also some additional review criteria for preliminary and final PUD development plans. And again, Section 1503-060E-17A does allow for modifications. The Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on July 19th at their regular meeting. They followed the same procedure they do for every other application, including presentations by staff and applicant, review the staff report and attachments, public hearing, members of the public, and then the decision. The commission at the July 19th meeting voted 6-0 to deny the application, finding that it does not comply with the applicable requirements of Section 1502.040 and 1502.050 F4 of the Land Development Code for the following reasons: that the application would adversely affect the neighbors, and that the modifications being requested did not include adequate mitigation. And that is reflected in PZR 2017-25C resolution, which was included in your packet. Within the 7-day appeal period, the applicant did appeal the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision of denial, and that appeal was based on the criteria that the decision was not supported by any competent evidence in the record, and that the decision is plainly inconsistent with the review criteria as shown by clear and convincing evidence. So just to review the appeal process for council members, we're at step 1 right now. Staff presents appeal report. In this case, the appellant and the applicant are one and the same. So they will be up next and they will be presenting the evidence and their argument. Then we'll hold a public hearing, council questions and discussion. Then there'll be a brief rebuttal by both staff and by the appellant applicant, and then council discussion and decision. The review criteria. City Council is the decision-making body on appeals from the Planning and Zoning Commission decisions. And the review criteria for your decision are listed up there. There's 3 of them. And again, this appeal is based on items 1 and 2. And the council options are to uphold the Planning and Zoning Commission decision, which is reflected in Resolution A that was included in your packet, reverse the decision, which was included as Resolution B in your packet, or modify the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So the next step is the appellant and applicant presents evidence and argument. And so I'm going to turn it over to them.
My name is Dr. Frank Beckvar, 3613 Sunflower Circle. I've been in this town. I've lived in this town for 22 years. I've got a general practice at 2130 Mountain View Avenue. And I paid taxes here from the beginning. And I enjoy this town. On August of 2014, I bought this said property, the land at 2120 17th Avenue. And for 2.5 years, I struggled to get this through to the point where I finally got unanimous approval from the entire city planning department. At that point, we were, after exhaustively going through ways to mitigate, handle the neighbors, all that type of stuff, we then had this meeting on July 19th. And I felt like we got the carpet pulled right from under us. We started rehashing things that we had already solved the problems to. And they just couldn't get out of that. And what happened, and what I want to explain to you is when you get full approval from the planning and zoning department, it's almost unheard of. Karen Bryant told me she's never seen it where we've got unanimous approval and then we go to get approval from the commission and they deny us for a PUD. So they denied us for 2 basic reasons. They said the application would adversely affect the neighbors. If you look at Section D, the term that's used in subsection D of the review standards is the application would significantly adversely affect the neighbors. But this is their reason for denial. The second thing is the modifications that we requested did not include adequate mitigation. Now, I immediately appealed this. I didn't agree with it at all. And I appealed it on these 2 reasons, that their decision did not support any competent evidence of record, and I felt that they acted on the pure emotions of the neighbors that we considered and mitigated for 2 years. And the second reason was the decision is plainly inconsistent with the review criteria, as shown by the clear and convincing evidence I'm about to go into. Okay, so we got a lot of things in your packet there, but I want to start with subsection B and just go into that a little bit. This just says that we met all those standards for subsection B. The only deviation was what Karen put up on the screen earlier, was that there were 3 modifications being requested. And I requested these modifications as a result of an easement restriction on the east side of my property, okay? Access requirements of an existing detention pond on the north side of my property, and the size of the parcel. Now, the entire city staff was in support of these modifications, okay? Because I was going to provide mitigation to each of my modifications, but more importantly, I was going to provide access to an otherwise inaccessible detention pond. They've been maintaining that detention pond by illegally driving through my property. And the city never planned for this access drainage. So we worked this out, that I would still mitigate each modification, and I would provide access for heavy equipment to move through and maintain that detention pond. So let's go through the modifications. First, we reduced the side buffers from 25 to 15 feet. This is how I mitigated that. I agreed, okay, to meet more stringent residential architectural design standards. Does anybody know what that means? What that means is we made it look like the neighborhood. Okay? My architect did a bang-up job. So if you see the plans, it's gorgeous. It looks like $1 million home. Okay? And I'll get into those standards a little bit later. But the second thing was the reduction in the rear yard setback from 20 to 10 feet. This is up against the detention pond. There's no homes for 200-300 feet. Okay? To mitigate, I still mitigated for it. I added 58 decorative plants throughout the site. Number 3, the reduction in the required landscaping plantings according to tables, you see that there. And the reason we reduced the landscape plantings is because I gave them that easement access. They have to drive heavy equipment back there. So we can't plant trees, we can't have plants because they have to get access through there, and they've been damaging my property, and I wasn't going to let them drive heavy equipment over my curbs. I think that makes sense. Okay, let's move on. So I've stressed the modifications and how we mitigated, which I think were very thorough. Okay, then let's move to subsection D, and let's read the fine print here. The application will not significantly adversely affect surrounding properties. Okay? They said it would not adversely affect the neighbors. It has to be, any project coming in is going to affect the neighbors. They're always going to feel violated. But it has to significantly adversely affect them. So we went into some of these concerns. Okay? So I'll go into some of their concerns and I'll tell you what we did for it. We had 2 years to think about this. My goodness, we had plenty of time. So, first of all, I want to build this project green. Karen Bryant told me I was the first project ever in this town that she reached for the specs on green building technology. I'm trying to do the right thing. So there was a neighbor that had a concern that wind turbines kill birds. And she's right. But she's talking about horizontal access turbines, the traditional windmill you see. Mine is a vertical access turbine, okay? And I have a statement from the company that builds these that says birds see these types of vertical access turbines and they avoid them. So it's not a bird issue at all. Another concern. There were compatibility concerns with the proposed commercial use and the existing residences. Okay, I talked about this earlier. This more stringent residential architectural design. What does that mean? Well, the second floor windows are offset from the viewing side, so I can't see those neighbors. We designed it that way. It looks like the neighborhood. We did that. Okay? The setbacks, I could, if I went in there and built a house in this neighborhood, I could be at 13 feet. We're at 15. Okay? If I wanted to build 30 feet, as a resident, going in, I could. But I have mine at 24. If you look around the entire neighborhood, around these neighbors that are upset, okay, and when I say these neighbors, it's only 2 or 3. I honestly have only heard from 2 or 3. Every house in the neighborhood is, a lot of them are 2-story. So they're at least the same height as my building. Yet there's others that are probably closer to 30. So I'm fitting in with the neighborhood. I'm doing everything I can. I've spent the time. I got full approval. And somehow the commission didn't like what we had put out there. And I thought Karen did an awesome job. I thought Don did an awesome job. Okay, another thing. The property values of the existing single-family residence would be decreased due to my development. Okay, if you look at Appendix A in your packet, Councilman, Councilwoman, Mayor Coombs, you'll see, okay, that I have included consulting with a 30-year veteran of real estate, Margaret Kababel. And she says that property values of the surrounding properties will not be negatively affected by my excellent PUD proposal. So check that letter out. I think you'll find that interesting. The homeowner to the west had concerns about me blocking his morning sun. So I spent more money, okay? I took a shade study. Didn't affect his morning sun. Was very, very thorough. And then I want to start on the east property line. If you look at this picture we've got up on the stand, in the commission hearing on July 19th, they said, you know, when we build a project like this, we need to have a fence on the east side. That commissioner didn't even realize that there is a fence that provides a buffer from my project. And again, we still mitigated that side. Those trees there, the neighbors were upset that we're taking those trees out there. We had a professional forester come in and say 93% of those are nuisance species and need to be removed. The other 7%, we said we would relocate, trying to be a good stewardship of our resources. Even the house I had on that property, if you saw last Wednesday, we moved it We moved that house. We even reused the house. So, when we look to the east, I also said, I've mitigated by our second floor windows can't look directly at them. So, I think we've pretty much hit this. Can we move this on to the next photo? How do I do it? Just click it? Yeah. And then understand, the neighbor was worried about privacy. That neighbor that we just showed, 106 feet, building to building. Do you know my house? How many of your houses? I live 15 feet, building to building. I'm not asking any more of these neighbors than I'm asking of myself. 15 feet. And that neighbor of the picture we just showed, she's 15 feet from her neighbor next to her, yet I'm significantly adversely affecting her. The neighbor, let's get the view. This is the neighbor to the west. Okay? Nice guy, by the way. I love these neighbors. I have no problem with them. They just don't realize that we did a lot of things to try to make this project work. So let's look at this. You can see he's got a large buffer of just trees on his side. Now I want the direct view. Can we move to the next? There's an alleyway. My property's to the right. Now look at this view. I'm leaving this fence, okay? My patients aren't going to be able to look directly at, that's his house over there. There's buffers there. we don't even have our landscaping in. I think we've adequately, I don't think we've significantly adversely affected him. Moving on, you can see his house is 57 feet away. Again, I'm 15 from my neighbor, I get along great, no mitigation. Here I've mitigated 3 times. The fence, the way I built the place, I've added plants. So, the last thing I want to say is they said that traffic will significantly adversely affect them. Can you think of anything in your knowledge that's less adversely affecting someone than a dental practice? I'm there 4 days a week. People make fun of me because I never work. All right? I'm not there on Monday. I'm there Monday, Tuesday. I'm not there on Wednesday. I'm there Thursday and half a day on Friday. I'm not there on the weekends. I'm not there after 6. I'm there less than probably the last residence that I rented to. It's a gorgeous project. So in closing, the Planning and Zoning Commission were plainly in error, and they were working purely on emotions in their denial of the preliminary and final PUD development plan with modifications. So I'm appealing based on the permissible grounds of appeal. The preliminary and final PUD development application as presented, I do not believe will adversely affect the neighboring properties, and the modifications we requested were well thought out. We took into account the adjacent property owners' concerns and include adequate mitigation. We seek the judgment by this council to do what's right. Pass a resolution reversing the PUZ decision and approve this application with no further conditions. And let me be a great neighbor. Let me build a project that this town will be proud of, and it'll be something no one's ever seen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I guess we'll now open up a public hearing. Is there anybody from the public that'd like to speak at this time?
Good evening. My name is Lorenzo Hayes. I live right next door. I'm the neighbor to the west. And this is not a resident. He keeps talking about resident. They could do this or that. It's not a resident. It's a commercial building. There's offices that's going to be rented above, plus a business is selling these wind turbines, I understand. Am I correct? And you're not going to be selling wind turbines? Oh, okay. They're going to rent the offices, and then they have the dental clinic down below. I just think that they should have to go by the 25-foot rule. That's all there is to it. We have to go by rules on my property. I have R1. I have 1.4 acres. There's very little I can do with it. You know, I'm kind of stuck with a lot of land and nothing I can do with it because of the rules that you presented to me for my property. So all I'm saying is that It is a nice looking project. I have no qualms about that, but I have the qualms about treatment rooms looking into my bedroom windows. Those trees, that buffer zone is a buffer zone that I planted, and some of it has been planted in the last 2 years since he has made this proposal. So I'm trying to put a buffer between us on my side. I think that they should also try to have a buffer on their side. It is a residential neighborhood. There is no other commercial businesses from Cook Court to I don't know how far going east, almost to Main Street, and then the rest of the businesses are all along Hover. So it is a residential neighborhood. We do have driveways onto 17th Avenue. There are no businesses surrounding us. So that's my concerns, is a 25-foot setback. My other neighbors aren't able to be here tonight. There's a severe illness, and the neighbor on the east side, so I don't, he made a statement when he was before the Planning Commission, but the Planning Commission did vote 6-0, said go back and take another look at your plans. So that's all that we're asking, is that they take another look at these plans. It is. It's and as far as residential value, unless I'm mixed-use zoning, I'll never get the money out of my property having a huge commercial building next to me. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to speak? Okay, now it's time for council questions and discussion. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Isn't the zoning on this piece of property, PUD, isn't a dental building a use by right?
Councilmember Finley, yes. The dental office is a use by right in the PUD.
And the only reason they had to go before planning and zoning were because of the modifications in the buffer zones and the reduction in the plantings.
Councilmember Finley, when this particular property is part of a much larger plan unit development, the Hover Crossing development. And when that plan unit development was approved, this particular lot was left out. And it was determined that when this lot would develop, it would have to go back through for development plan approval.
Okay, so that was when they bought it, they knew they would have to go through the planning and zoning development process, or commission.
Correct.
The reduction in the buffers, are those due to us needing to use that right-of-way to go to the drainage pond?
No. The only mitigation, the only modification that there were 3 modifications, and the modification that the third one, the reduction in the required landscaping plantings, which means the number of trees that needed to be planted, the number of trees on site, that modification is a result of needing access to that drainage and detention area because we cannot plant anything in that area.
Okay, so the reduction in the plantings is what was caused by that basically a road that goes into the drainage pond, as I understand it, right?
Correct.
And the reduction in the other buffers?
The reduction in the other buffers was a request that the applicant made as part of their development plan.
Okay, thank you.
I also would like to let council know that there are some other staff members here from Public Works and Natural Resources that can help answer questions as well.
Councilmember Christensen.
Karen, I'm kind of curious. I go down 17th all the time, and oh, that's right. It wasn't demolished. It was moved, and that's wonderful. But I'm curious as to why this is a use by right, because there are no other commercial buildings there. They're all residential. And so why would this particular little lot be able to be developed commercially?
Councilmember Christensen, this particular lot is part of the Hover Crossing overall plan unit development, which includes a much larger piece of property. And that was a PUD that included a significant amount of commercial. When that PUD was approved previously, this lot was zoned PUD mixed use, but it's not, it was never, there was never a development plan. The property immediately to the east, I believe, is plan unit development residential. I need to verify that, but I believe so. And then there is single family residential to the west of it.
I'm just wondering why we would make that Hover Crossing thing extend way out to places that are residential. I mean,
that's not a question I can answer, Councilmember Christensen.
That's not part of this hearing right now. I mean, we need to be asking questions about this specific.
I know, but I mean, if you look at, I mean, it's all residential. I don't get why we'd make that a use by right.
So I've got a question on the back setback that was 10 feet. That's where the next closest neighbor was like 108 feet. So, I mean, I guess I don't see that that's a huge impact on that lot line. Councilmember Bagley, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess my thoughts are, so I guess there's the legal aspect and there's the what I think aspect. I mean, the criteria tonight is there, I mean, as the doc pointed out, you know, for example, he used the word significantly adversely impacts. That would be a good argument if we were planning and zoning. Tonight, it's the word any. Is there any, you know, evidence in the record that supports the decision? And to me, what jumps out is that 10-foot setback. To me, that is not only any, it's actually fairly a big deal, I think, if you go from 25 to 15 and 20 to 10. And then the other thing is it plainly inconsistent with the review criteria? I don't think it was. Now, granted, if I was on planning and zoning, it'd be a different question. But I think the two points that you appeal on, as I'm looking through and read the planning and zoning notes, I mean, to me, that jumps out. Things like, and then they also say there wasn't enough mitigation, which is, I mean, 58 plants. I mean, I joke all the time that when people bring their plans, it's this just trees everywhere, plants everywhere. But at the end of the day, you know, plants, nobody ever goes back and counts plants or makes sure that the plants are still alive in a year. And so this is an instance where it's not a use by right, it's a PUD, but the plan was never approved. So typically I would say, well, if you just build the PUD that was approved, you know, can't say that here because it doesn't exist. But I think that, I mean, I don't think that, I mean, I suspect that there wouldn't have been a denial if you weren't trying. I get the impression that you're just taking an office and trying to pigeonhole it in a residential area, and the neighbors don't want that. If it were 10 feet smaller, literally 10 feet, just 10 feet on either side, or one side this way, and 10 feet on the back this way, I think, I mean, in reading the notes, I think you would have had a different result. And so you can build it. My dad's a dentist, just assume my dad's a dentist, my brother's a dentist, my brother-in-law's a dentist, and everything you're saying is correct. I mean, you guys are lazy and never work. But all kidding aside, I mean, dentists are good neighbors, you know, that they are. But we're seeing a second story, which again, you could build, but in my mind, it's that to me, if I were on planning and zoning, would have given me pause. Therefore, tonight, was there any evidence? Yeah. And was it plainly inconsistent with the review criteria? It wasn't plainly. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I would encourage you, it's a great project. You know, I'd encourage you just to bring it in.
You know, I struggle with the word significantly because every project, you know, if you even build a deck on the back of your house, it affects your neighbors while you're building it. I mean, so there's a difference between, you know, adversely affects and significantly adversely affects. So that's kind of what I struggle with here. You know, I kind of find it hard to believe that it would significantly affect, but Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. The FAA is across the street. This is a main arterial. It was a PUD because of all the development just to the west, except for a couple of houses, which, you know, they're not going to have a house there anymore. They're not going to have that little house, but they're going to have a property that's cared for better than that little house was for many, many years. And the 10-foot setback is to a detention pond, not to a house. It's a pond that, you know, I don't know why it wants to be that close to that pond. That's kind of ugly. And the other buffer to the neighbor to the west is more than probably most of us have next to our neighbor. You know, to me, this building looks better than many of the houses over there and would actually add to the value of the homes around it. I sat on P&Z when they listened to this, and I actually thought that the commissioners, who are diligent and do a great job, missed the mark on this one. I think you had grounds to appeal that decision, and I certainly would appeal it.
Councilmember Christensen.
I don't really have too many problems with the mitigation. I have a problem with the use of it when this is a resident. I realize that the FAA is across from this, but it's way across from it. All of 17th is residential except for the FAA and the park. That's why there's a park there, because it's residential, until you get down to nearly Main Street. And if I were, this isn't, as this other gentleman said, this isn't just a dentist's office, it's also more than a dentist's office. And I think it's a good project, and I think the vertical access turbine is a great idea, because that's a very smart thing that's much more efficient, for one thing. So, you know, I'm torn because I think it's a good project, but not for this neighborhood, because I wouldn't want a dentist's office coming, or any kind of, you know, commercial office coming into my neighborhood.
Well, right now, we're just in the part where we're just asking questions of either staff or the applicant at this point. Now we have to have a rebuttal by staff, and then we can have council discussions, and then we'll make a decision. So we're not really in the council discussion, we're really just in the council question mode right now. Councilmember Bagley?
And thank you very much. And the reason I gave my comments is because I wasn't making a decision. I want to hear what you have to say. So.
Okay, so now it's time, I guess, for the rebuttal from staff, and then the rebuttal from the applicant as appellant.
Mayor Coombs, council members, I don't have a rebuttal, so I'm just going to turn this over to the applicant.
Okay. Does the applicant / appellant have any more rebuttal or statements?
Couple things, okay? I bought this property because it was zoned PUD, and that neighbor that came up, that was zoned PUD. Can we bring up the last elevation as well? It was zoned PUD, and he zoned PUD. If you're not going to zone it that way, and you're not going to allow business in there, why would I have ever bought this? Look, it was obvious that this planning commission made a decision that was purely on emotions. They ignored the review criteria. That setback in the back, 10 feet, there's nothing back there. Great point, by the way. Okay, let's look at this elevation. This is me looking towards the neighbor to my west. There's a line, a kind of a dark line you can see. There's a fence there. He said my patients would look directly into his home. There's going to be a fence along their viewing line. The second floor, we designed it to have site views that couldn't look directly at his home. And so when you say this area shouldn't be 2 blocks away, you have Starbucks, you have all those businesses right there. There's the church right there. And so we're not talking, we shoved into this neighborhood. This place looks great with these setbacks. It looks awesome. So I want to just go that, we spent ample time getting this right. And the plan was thoroughly mitigated. The neighbors' complaints were taken into consideration. I told you I want to be a great neighbor. I've always had a dream of building this practice. And so long, there's thousands and thousands of cars coming up 17th. This is a great place for a business. This is one of the first green projects here. The other thing is I was told I could do this. I spent $80,000 to get to this point. It's costing me $8,000 a month waiting. What you don't realize, if I was a resident and I moved in here, I could build 1.5 feet closer to the sky and 30 feet tall. No problem. No zoning to go through, nothing. I could have loud music. I could have pit bulls. Okay? I could be a pot smoker, which I'm not, by the way. I could have junk cars and leave them out front. There's no HOA, things here. So I'm here 4 days a week, like I told you. He's never going to see me. I got a great contractor, Philip McKee's built he's been building in this city for 20 years in Boulder County. John Freeman, who knows Ziggy's Coffee? Ziggy's Coffee, he designed it. He did an awesome job with my project. If you don't pass this, I got to go back to square one. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can. I put everything into this. If you can't feel the passion, I'm passionate about this. This could be a liquor store. You want high volume? Put in a liquor store. I could sell this in a liquor store, could go in here, get the setbacks, and boom, they're rolling. This is going to be a great addition to this neighborhood. And by you voting this, okay, you say you're supporting small businessmen, like myself. Born and pretty much bred here, okay? And this thing about another business coming in, that's just them drumming stuff up, okay? My upstairs, that's an office for me. In the basement, I was going to put a workout, climbing thing, American Ninja, the whole bit. So I'm asking you to support a unanimous. The Planning Commission was unanimous. It was well thought out. This development was perfect, in my opinion. And I'm asking you to pass a resolution reversing the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision and approving this application without any further conditions.
Could I ask you one quick question?
Sure.
How much power does your wind turbine generate? I was just curious.
It's still in the early they haven't even. I'm one of the first ones to get this, and they're doing a lot. They think it'll power my whole practice. Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other discussions or questions from the applicant? If not, Councilmember Bagley?
So, Mr. May, is this a de novo hearing? And if you could explain what that means.
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney, no, this is not a de novo hearing. We made those changes when we made the changes to the Land Development Code. Our current appeal criteria are more suited towards an appellate body. So we're looking at, we modeled it after Rule 106, where you're looking at for competent evidence in the record. You're looking for exceeding their jurisdiction, or, you know, under Rule 106, it's arbitrary and capricious. We translated that into plainly inconsistent with the criteria in the code.
So, thank you. So, I mean, to be clear, if I were on planning and zoning, I would vote for this. I would have voted for this project, and I would have argued adamantly for the project. Even tonight, I'm persuaded by your zeal, your passion, and your arguments. They're all right. They're all right. However, we're sitting as a quasi-judicial body, and the question is, was the decision supported by any competent evidence in the record? It was. I mean, I don't agree with it. You certainly don't agree with it. But it is. It's there. They gave a reason. It's some competent evidence. And then, is the decision plainly inconsistent with the review criteria? It's not plainly inconsistent. Plainly being the key word, and it has to be clear and convincing evidence, which is not 51%. You know, it's not like, it's you got to come back and say, clear and convincing. You know, it's like, wow, they really got it wrong. And I mean, unless I just want to completely ignore what the law is, I don't see how I can vote as you're asking. Want to?
Wow. So I think it's a great project. I don't think it would be significantly impacting the neighbors, but yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it's not the criteria.
It was the criteria.
It was when planning and zoning, but now that it's coming to us, we have to say that they, sitting as a planning and zoning board member, I would vote in favor of this project. But I guess that's not what we're doing tonight, unfortunately. I mean, basically, we have to prove that they were, I don't know. Anybody else have any thoughts? Or Councilmember Bagley?
What do you guys think about tabling this for when Councilmember Santos gets back? Because the project's not going to pass unless 4 of us vote for number B.
Well, how do you know?
Anyway,
It's going to be a 3-3. Well, we don't know. We don't know. Yeah, I have no idea how. I don't know how I'm going to know. You know, I definitely want to vote for it. I mean, I'm fine with if you want to.
I would be okay with tabling it. I really would. But I do have one other question. Councilmember Bagley, you said the decision is not supported by any competent evidence in the record. And it's inconsistent with the review criteria. I don't get it.
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Rick. It was basic. I mean, that standard basically is saying, at least in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. May, it's that, I mean, the Planning and Zoning Commission basically just had to be just out to lunch, doing it on their own with no evidence, no reasoning whatsoever. I mean, that's layman's terms. And you in looking at their notes and the evidence that was presented, you know, to me what jumps out is that, I mean, even if everything else is true, asking for the setback variances, that's some competent evidence. We just have to, I mean, we have to show that there's no competent evidence, and there was some. And so by tabling it, I would like some more time to get I'd really like to vote for the project. But as it is right now, I'd vote against it, because I don't see a way. I'd like to think about it more, percolate. That's really what I'm asking, and since Gabe's not here, I just figured that's a good excuse. And so I'd like some more time to just think, rather than make a decision tonight.
Okay, you made a motion, Councilmember Finley, did you second that? Okay, Councilmember Peck?
Okay, I would like to table it as well, especially after listening to the applicant, his passion. If we could just have another week, I think that would be good, to not move on it at all. Can we do that legally?
Not discuss or defer, just think.
Yeah, can we do that legally?
We can't consider any other evidence that's not presented though.
Yeah, just think. Read the packet again. Meditate.
Mayor and council, is council looking to table for 1 week or 2 weeks? Next week would be a study session. We could change it to a regular session. We're investigating the impact on the budget.
Let's just do 2.
2 weeks. The only other thing, well, 2 things I would say. One is that the appeal criteria are meant to be deferential to the Planning Zoning Commission's substantive decision. You are looking for sort of procedural errors, no competent evidence or plainly inconsistent with review criteria. I've also heard you talk about quasi-judicial proceeding and not being able to talk to anybody. That would be key here if we're putting this on hold and tabling for 2 weeks, that you are not to have any ex parte communications on this. Your decision should be made by the evidence presented at the hearing.
Okay, I guess we've got a motion, it's been seconded, that's Councilmember Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbs. Just to clear, the motion is, I move that we table this for 2 weeks, so that we can hear it at the next regular session and have Councilmember Santos present with us. That's what I'd like.
And Councilmember Santos can review the tapes of tonight's meeting again. Councilmember Christensen?
I support this to table it.
Let's vote then.
Feel like, Mr. Bekvar has been through has spent a great deal of money and time and effort trying to do this and trying to do the right thing. Whether I believe that this was the right location, I just need to think about it some more, because I don't want to put him through any more hell, but I think we also need to have Councilman Santos here. Thank you.
Okay, let's vote. And that passes 6-0 with Councilmember Santos absent.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is the 2018 budget presentations. Jim Golden will lead this off.
Mayor Coombs, members of council, I'm Jim Golden, Director of Finance, and with me is Teresa Malloy, the Budget Manager. So we have a couple of items on the agenda for tonight related to the 2018 budget. I'm going to take you through an overview or summary for the general fund and the public safety fund. So jumping right in, I wanted to first call your attention to attachment C that was in your packet for tonight, and it's on page S11 and also 837. And that is a fund summary, if I can get to it myself here. Proposed budget, 2018 proposed budget summary by fund, showing the whole of the budget, a comparison of 2017's $282 million budget by fund to the 2018 $316 million budget by fund. So we wanted to show you where some of these significant changes are in this budget. There are 40 individual funds that are listed here. That's 11.8% growth over the 2017 proposed budget, and these are just the beginning numbers. As you know, we talked about previously that these grow with additional appropriations throughout the year. The funds with the large percentage increases and decreases, some of them are due to capital projects, and those would be, you can see in the last column or the last section of 3 columns on the attachment is showing the increases for, say, the sanitation fund has about a $3 million increase due to CIP projects. The storm drainage fund has a $4.7 million increase, or I should say $4.7 million of CIP projects in 2018. The Park Improvement Fund is increasing with $3.6 million of capital projects. And then the Water Acquisition Fund is another large increase with $5.78 million of capital projects. So then elsewhere, the other increases that make up the overall increase from $282 million to $316 million in the general fund, as we'll be covering here tonight, there's about a $6 million or so increase in the budget from 2017 to 18. And we will go through that and what makes up those differences here in a bit. Electric and broadband fund is increasing a few $1 million, about $3 million, due to broadband operations picking up, so the expenses are increasing as well in that area. And then also the fleet fund is increasing as well significantly, from about $4 million, and that is really all related to capital expenses. They're not included within the CIP, but they are within the operating budget as capital expenses for purchases of equipment. This is information I shared with you earlier about the projections that we used for the 2018 budget based on looking at our sales tax through July, and where we're projecting it to end the year at 6.74% growth as first assumptions that we've made, and then on top of that, growth of 1.77% in sales and use tax for 2018. We looked at projected population growth of 2.45% and economic growth of 2.6%. But overall, we did back out some significant one-time payments that are either delinquent payments or just one-time anomalies that are impacting the 2017 collections, and so that is why our net increase is only 1.77% over and above the 17 projections.
Slide you were just on for a second.
You bet.
Yeah. So when you say projections to the end of 2017, that you're projecting at the very end of the year, we're only going to have sales tax of 6.2% increase, even though we're 12.2% as of July. So you'd expect it to really fall off that much, or?
Mayor Coombs, members of council, that's correct. And if you read those monthly emails that I'll be sending one to you tomorrow, actually, I've been warning you all year long that we've had one full year of collections from Sam's Club as of the end of June. We've had one full year, first year I should say, of collections from Amazon through the end of April. And so there is no longer that significant growth from those two. And that's where we're starting to see a decline. Through August, we're down to 12% growth overall for sales and use tax, which you'll be receiving.
Okay, thank you.
Built the budget off the building permit revenue estimates from Planning Development Services. We have this year, number of dwelling units was budgeted 1,009. We're up to 667 after 7 months. Next year, there's 995 dwelling units projected for the budget. There is some increased revenue over 2017's projections because of the valuation for these 995. So the property tax revenue estimates, we received our first estimates last spring. There was an update that we received in July, which really did not show us any change in the estimates. That's really what we had to utilize in putting together our proposed budget for 2018. We have a 15.3% increase in budgeted property tax revenue, a total of $2,477,000 of new or increased property tax over 2017's budget. We did receive a preliminary assessed valuation at the end of August, which really had very little change. It actually had an increase from what our original estimates we received last spring were. And those are still really not final, far from final. There will be, through the end of this week, they do continue to receive or are open to receiving appeals through the end of this week, and then over the next couple of months those appeals will be dealt with. And so we can pretty much expect that there will be a decrease. We've not budgeted for $191,000 of property tax at this point in time because we wanted to allot some amount of money for those appeals. Ultimately, and we will talk to you next week about potentially budgeting that if it does come in, but if so, it would be for one-time type expenses as opposed to ongoing, not something that we would want to tie any ongoing expenses into in case they're being reduced by appeals. We will not know that outcome, though, until late November. So the general fund reset items included, we are, as I mentioned previously, have finalized taking care of the reset issues that we identified originally. The last two that included in this budget are administrative overhead in public works and natural resources of $121,000, now being allocated to the general fund instead of the various enterprise funds in the street fund. And then there are also two FTE and ETS that we were charging fully to pretty much 5 funds, four enterprise funds and street fund again, that are now going to be allocated by the overall ETS administrative transfer fee. So that reduces the cost to those 5 funds and increases the general fund's allocation by about $130,000. This was not part of the original budget. I'm going to refer to this a week or two ago, that it was, we actually had a different type of adjustment in here, or a reduction of an insurance fund expense, and realized that we had overlooked the ETS positions, and so we wanted to get those reset items finalized this year. So this will be a slight change to the original budget, and there's about an $18,000 adjustment between these two items, and we'll take care of those insurance funds issues in a future year. So the overall 2017 ongoing revenue expenses for the general fund were $74.8 million. This 2018 proposed budget is $80.2 million of ongoing revenues and expenses. That's an increase of 7.16%, $5.3 million greater than 2017's original budget. So the changes from the expense end of things, we had $386,000 of reductions in ongoing expenses, and then $5.75 million of increases in ongoing expenses. I'll take you through some of those highlights here of those. Some of the reductions in base budget expenses included workers' comp expenses reduced by about $38,000. We're not actually reducing our workers' compensation funding for the self-insurance fund, but instead each year we reallocate those dollars based on actual claims activity, and the result of that was a slight decrease here in the general fund and probably an offset in other funds that make up for that difference, but the funding to the workers' comp fund did not go down. Cable Trust contract funding is being reduced by $32,500. This is simply following our financial policy about the use of cable franchise revenues, and we allocate 25% of the budgeted revenue from the cable franchise to the Cable Trust. We're reducing that estimate by 4 times this amount, so $130,000 for 2018, and that's simply because we're seeing that reduction in franchise revenue from Comcast. Excuse me. So that began.
Councilor Peck?
Hi, Jim. Since that's from Comcast, what are the chances of getting contract funding Cable Trust from level 3? Do we get any franchise fees?
Mayor, members of council, it's layer 3. It's layer 3. We do not receive franchise fees from layer 3.
They are, Eugene, you want to help me with the term? You have the non-wireless entities. Essentially, they don't have the franchise fees in general terms is based on use of the right-of-way within the city, and that they have a wired infrastructure in place. They are not that. We say generally they are more like a Netflix. They provide it from a server somewhere else, and it comes through the system. We are hoping to have some conversations about some of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of the franchise fees. But in terms of how that turns out, we still have to have those conversations with them about issues like this.
I'd be curious as to what those are.
Yep.
Okay, moving on, the public safety physicals reduced. Actually, we had these budgeted, we began to budget for these in the health benefit fund last year, so we reduced an amount where we continue to have it reduced have it budgeted in 17 in the general fund. So there's really not a reduction in the amount of physicals that we'll be doing. Contributions to the employee benefit fund have been reduced $276,000. I mentioned last week during our presentation on benefits that we were able to reduce that because the health benefit fund is increasing fund balance year by year. So the increases in ongoing expenses, as you're familiar from past budgets, we categorize our requests as level 1 expenses, which are expenses that we're going to have, they're ongoing expenses that we're going to have to incur whether or not we fund them or not. There are increases in contracts and things like that. We'll go through some of those examples of that here in a few minutes, but there's $1.27 million of those type of expenses included here. And ongoing level 2 expenses are increased service levels over and above the previous year's budget. That's $878,000. And then we have some one-time items that a lot of our one-time items also include an ongoing component. So that third amount here is $79,000 is tied to one-time items included in this proposed general fund budget. So beginning with the ongoing level one, $251,000 of recreation temp wage increases. That's for the minimum wage requirements. We did address those in 2017's budget as required by the law, but we did that on a one-time basis, and now we need to address it on an ongoing basis. Banking.
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. These are the numbers, they're not increases. The only increase here is the recreation temp wage. So like, for example, the investment managers, we're going from 40 to 100, or we're going from 40 to 60.
This is the amount of the increases that we're having. So each one of these is an incremental increase over 2017's budget.
All right, so my question is, the investment management services, is that?
I'll have to talk about those in a second here.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so the next three items, banking, investment management services, and contract sales tax auditing. So these are really not new expenses. We're not increasing the level of expenses in our budget, but we're changing our approach to budgeting these. What we have been doing with each of these three type of expenses, we've been netting them against revenue in the past. What we're trying to do now is to show the full expense and increase the revenue rather than net it against the revenue, so that we're being more transparent about the expense. It's a better way to report the expenses. So each of them are not an increase. We've been doing, we continue to do this right now in the 2017 fiscal year. We just do not recognize them as expenses currently. We just in turn reduce them against either investment expenses, or in the third item, we net it against sales tax revenue. So we are adding $320,000 for these three items, but there's an offsetting revenue being added as well. And the last item here is the Union Reservoir recreation lease. Also not a new expense. We're moving this from the water fund to the general fund though. Obviously the revenues for the Union Reservoir fees are recorded in the general fund. Felt that really should be covered by those revenues in the general fund, so we moved that from the water fund, where it's funded through ratepayers, to where those revenues are instead recorded. So this slide here is over a half of the $1.27 million of level one type expenses. So we're going to get into some lower numbers here. I'm not going to get into the really nitty-gritty numbers, but some of the larger ones that I'll continue to bring to your attention. We have increases in overtime, public safety, all tied to increases in pay due to the collective bargaining agreements. We have a payment that will be partially netted against revenue, but to the hazmat authority that we are about to begin with other entities in the area, and the council approved that agreement last month, I believe. EDGE contract funding is funding that was provided in 2017 on a one-time basis. This is not the full amount that we provide to EDGE, but this is the amount that was from one-time expenses that we're moving instead to ongoing expenses. We have Platte River Power Authority costs to the city for maintenance of our CIS. It's our utility billing system, $38,000. And $24,000 for public safety's peer support group therapist. We've temp wage increases again, as I mentioned before, the other temp wages in recreation. A lot of these are tied to minimum wage requirements. $20,000 in library. We have elevator inspections plan review of $24,000 increase, which is offset by a revenue source that we receive from Dr. Cog for the expenses. Increase of $20,000 towards the US 36 lobbying contract, and then $12,000 for license plate recognition subscription, for software subscription. And then the next few items are in Public Works, Natural Resources, increases in contracts that we provide services from third parties. First for parks maintenance for $16,000. Core building repairs contracted for $14,000. Custodial contracts for $25,000. Parks refurbishment for $10,000. a new item in expenses that actually parks are already incurring and need more funding to cover their costs for cleaning up homeless camps, $11,000. And then a couple other line items for Public Works at $4,781. In Public Safety, we have base line item increases for detectives of $15,000, safety equipment in Public Safety of $10,000, traffic unit investigative expense of $15,000, training funds of $13,000, ammunition and firearms program expenses for $11,500. Public safety awards and recognition costs of $15,000. Overtime increases for maintaining the fire gear, $18,000. Uniform and equipment replacement of $12,000. Academy tuition and training costs for both police and fire of $5,000. And then another 13 or so line items that add up to about $34,000 from public safety as well. Elsewhere, level 1 expenses, this Small Business Development Center Leading Edge Series increase in cost of $7,400. Auditorium concessions that we need to cover of $16,000 of cost. And then other community services line items, 9 of them for $22,000. Other development services line items, 7 of them for $19,000, almost $20,000. Shared services department, 6 line items for $28,000. And then finally, in the mayor and council budget, we have dues for CML, MMC, and the chamber. These are chamber dues are not an increase so much as a transfer from costs that were being expended out of the electric fund previously are now moving back into the general fund, kind of a smaller budget reset type of change. So then moving into level 2 expenses. And I lost my notes. Place here. Okay. Level 2 expenses, as I mentioned before, are $878,000 in the general fund for 2018. So the largest portion of that is $460,000 for Affordable Housing Fund, transferred to raise that level of funding to $1 million. We'll be presenting a little bit more information on that next week on the use of those monies. Ambulance service cost of $200,000. A couple items built into this I'll be covering in the revenue changes in a few minutes as well. But staff's been analyzing the ambulance model in town. We know that the situation with AMR may not be able to continue with the same model that exists today. We've estimated what it might take to continue maintaining those services with AMR in 2018. And that's what we've built into this budget, but we're really not sure yet what the future is going to look like and what the future model will look like. That's continued to be working on. But what we've done in this budget is we've had to reduce the amount of revenue that AMR contracts to pay to the city for our dispatching services, and then in turn we've also increased the budget, or put into the budget, $200,000 that we believe may be necessary to put towards ambulance services in 18. So I think our intention is to set that aside in a non-departmental budget until we see where that goes in the near future. So,
is there any questions about that?
Nope. So moving on, we have other increases in level 2 expenses, temp wages for a PC specialist of $37,500. We have a downtown corridor program. We're going to give you some more brief information on that next week from Public Works Natural Resources. We've talked about increasing some services downtown. We're also looking to do some increased level of service along some of the greenways, and like I said, PW&R will address that in a little bit more extent next week.
In general, this is one of the items when we talked about the question of homelessness and the impact, and in the downtown area in the greenways. This is one of the items that's getting at some of the maintenance issues that we have associated with this, and Bob will go over those in more detail.
So we have learning management software and public safety of $25,000 is an ongoing cost to that. And then on-call pay for traffic officers of $22,000. Community services, public relations and marketing expenses is tied to a new position that is also being added in the 2018 budget, but these are the ongoing expenses of $22,000. Physical abilities testing and human resources, $13,500. Database maintenance and senior services of $10,000, and then an open records request tracking system. This is ongoing cost related to it of $9,800. Other ongoing level 2, we have, now I'm just going to give you some line items, public safety line items, a couple for $7,000. We do have a transfer to the Affordable Housing Fund to cover some benefit costs that the city, the general fund generally covers related to affordable housing, or the employees covered in the Affordable Housing Fund, $7,500 increase there. And then community services to $10,000 for 2 line items, development services and economic development, $12,500 for 3 line items. And then in shared services, $3,300 for 3 line items. So the increases in ongoing expenses, these are the ones that are related to pay beyond the overtime ones that I've referred to, or temp wages so far. Collective bargaining pay increases, $777,000. Step pay increases in public safety, $58,000 there. And then master police officer appointments are another $30,000. Other general fund employees, the pay increases that we referred to last week in the proposed pay plan for 2018, those total $1,277,000. Those are the increase to market, the 1% increase above market, paying at a 101%, and benefits that are tied to those increases, as well as we mentioned that there are a number of positions that had market increases beyond 2% that had to be adjusted as well. So that's the makeup of that number. We did just determine within the last couple of hours that on the next line item, the new positions here, the 12.9 FTE, did not include benefits, and that's actually backed into that pay number above it of $1,277,000. So we're going to fix that number and give you that information in next week's presentation. But the new positions are 12.9 FTE in the general fund are $702,000 just for before benefits, and the benefits related to it are in the number before it there, the $1,277,000. And finally, the increase in the exceptional pay budget of 1% is $343,000 in the general fund. So we talked about we have a 1% budget currently to pay employees from anywhere from market to the top of the pay range. And we're trying to fund that at a greater amount so that we're able to better reward employees in those areas. Other increases in ongoing liability insurance transfers increased by $6,500. Again, this is just a reallocation amongst the different funds. An increase in the old hire police pension contribution, I referred to that last week, $10,000 increase. Fleet lease charges for 2018 to the general fund increased $58,000 based on the O&M replacement costs. And human service agency funding, this is reflecting the amount of, under your financial policy, the amount that we fund that, which is a percentage of the sales and property tax that we budget within the general fund. So this is almost $90,000 of an increase tied to the amount that's been budgeted as an increase for 2018 in those two revenue sources. And that percentage is an odd number that I don't know off the top of my head, but 2.05 or 2.05. And then finally, I talked about the increase in contributions to the general employees retirement plan last week. This is the general fund share at $112,000. So there are 12.9 new FTE proposed in 2018. I listed these for you the first night that we went over the budget. My plan actually is for staff to actually address these briefly next week. So I'm not going to read them off to you again. They're all here, though, as well as in your budget message. These are just the general fund FTE, but we will address all of the FTE next week. Proposed FTE, proposed new FTE, as opposed to all FTE. Right? We have the last three FTE that are listed up here that I have the asterisk next to are actually not only in the general fund, but another 0.25% increase in other funds within Public Works Natural Resources as well. So they're each really half FTE increases in the total budget. Okay, so those are all the expenses that are increasing in the proposed budget, and we, again, I want to point out we had some significant revenue increases, so it really had the ability to take care of some important needs. A lot of level 1 type expenses and some of the significant level 2 expenses that we're able to address, as well as all of those pay issues. So on the revenue side, we had some decreases. I already mentioned the decrease in the cable TV franchise revenue. These estimates are really all reflecting what we're seeing as changes in our current level of revenues, unless there's a reason like the emergency dispatching that I referred to previously related to AMR. Court fines and fees are down. They've been down for a number of years now. We've been reducing this year by year gradually. I think we're now getting it down to where we're actually seeing the level of actual revenues that we're receiving. It does come down to lower amount of activity for fines or tickets that are being written for fines, and as well as the amount of revenue that's just going through the court has reduced quite a bit from a number of years ago. We had a $200,000 decrease last year, $156,000 decrease this year, and I hope that we do not have to do this any further in future years. A couple other areas where we have some decreases as well. These revenues that have small amount of changes could go in any direction from year to year, and we're just trying to reflect the trends that we're seeing so far. The intergovernmental revenues are from a number of different sources, but they net out to a decrease of $11,670. The biggest decrease is severance tax from the state. We're seeing that decrease year by year, so we reduced that by $10,000. And then senior services, charges for services could be from a number of different areas. It's just a total there. Code enforcement and admin penalty, and then our miscellaneous revenues. Where we're seeing increases in ongoing revenue. So the property tax, I mentioned we budgeted $2.477 million. We also have an increase in sales and use tax of $2 million, $2,088,000. This is really probably the first time in a number of years that we're seeing strong growth from both of these primary revenue sources within the general fund. It's making a big difference in our ability to address issues in the 2018 budget. We've not seen significant increases in the property tax except for 2 years ago with the first reassessment that was going upwards since the downturn in 2008. So we've not been able to address things in the general fund because of the limited revenue increases. You're seeing us be able to actually do more in this year's general fund budget because of this level of revenue increase, and address needs like the affordable housing and all the positions, the 12.9 positions that we're able to add that you'll be hearing more about next week. These are all things that we're able to address at the council, and including the changes to the pay plan that we discussed last week. Council has heard about some of those in previous years. The revenue from these two sources has given us an opportunity we haven't had before. The sales and use tax is a little odd because I told you we're going to have like a 1.76% increase, but that's over what we projected we would end this year at. And what we will end this year at is above what we're budgeting for 2016, which is one of the reasons why this is so much higher. The other reason's got to do with the tax increment sales tax in the Village at the Peaks and how we had to budget that for 2017. And not knowing how much of that, there were so many unknowns in that whole equation for the Village at the Peaks and how much we had to pledge towards the Village at the Peaks the Village at the Peaks. We had to pledge 1.4% of that sales tax towards the debt payment this year. And as a result of that, we didn't have a lot of sales tax go into the general fund this year in 2017. And that kind of changes in the budget for 2018. We're not going to be as reliant on the sales tax. I'm going to take you through that in a little bit more detail next week when we have more time. But so as a result, the general fund actually will see more sales tax revenue than it has in 2017. So there's some of this growth of $2 million is coming from that as well. Franchise revenue is, and I do want to point out one other thing about the sales tax, and that is we will be talking to you about financial policies in 2 weeks from tonight. And we are going to make one recommended change to the financial policy regarding the allocation of the sales tax between the general fund and the public improvement fund. We have been using an approach for about close to 10 years now where we budget it so that's whatever percentage is within the financial policy, and which is currently 85% general fund, 15% public improvement fund. We're not changing that. But what we do with the actual allocation of the sales tax is we direct the use tax to the public improvement fund and the sales tax to the general fund in relationship to whatever the budget percentages are. And that's however the revenue actually comes in during the year is how it gets split. So it doesn't always end up 85-15 as a result of that. So we're recommending, because that's an approach that we took after the economic downturn to try to put one-time revenue towards the public improvement fund and the ongoing revenue towards the general fund. And use tax is more one-time related. We don't have to do that when we're not in a time of an economic stress. And so, earlier this year I had to get you to transfer $250,000 from the general fund to the public improvement fund because we have winners and losers in that equation. Decided we're not going to do that, or going to recommend that we not do that in this year's budget so that we don't have that inequity throughout the year to deal with. Doesn't really change the proposed budget because we're still doing it 85-15, but it will change how we process those revenues during the year. So then again, we have franchise revenue increases from a number of different sources of $28,000, mostly they're from the city enterprises. Hazmat Authority revenue of $25,000. Hazmat Authority is going to reimburse us for some expenses that we incur here at the city. Liquor application fees have increased. Building permit revenue from the projections that I mentioned before, as well as the plan check fees, they're all tied to the dwelling unit projections that we mentioned earlier. Recreation fee increases. We will be talking to you next week about the recommended fee increases there. This is pretty much offsetting those minimum wage increases. And then Union Reservoir fee increases will also be covering those next week. Cell phone rebates, this is revenue that wasn't budgeted previously, is included on an ongoing revenue basis now, and then fire inspection fees that have increased. We have land development fees that are, again, reflecting permit revenues and activity, or application activity, $25,000 increase there. And then some smaller amounts. And then as far as the interest income goes, it's a combination of both the accounting issue I talked about previously about our bank expenses and our investment management fees are impacting our interest revenue, as well as increased returns. Those expenses and revenues impact all of our funds, and so there's an allocation of that revenue across all of our funds, as well as an impact on our ATFs. Our ATFs are our administrative transfer fees. It's the last item here, $464,000 increase in ATF fees to the operating funds. This is reflecting increases in the general fund's cost of services. So again, overall, 7.2% increase, $5.3 million of increased revenues and ongoing revenues and expenses for 2018. So I'm going to shift a little bit into talking about our general fund reserve policy. This first slide here is looking at our reserve policy for 2017. So this is our picture for 17. Our current target. So our reserve policy is that we will address it in 3 phases. We'll fund the table reserve, we'll fund the emergency reserve as we can, and then after we fund that, we'll fund a stabilization reserve of 3 to 8%. So total wise, and this is all a percentage of our ongoing expenditures in the general fund. So as they change from year to year, our targets raise as well. So this is based on the $74 million or so of ongoing expenses in the 2017 budget. It results in the table reserve from the end of last year of $3.9 million. An 8% emergency reserve target would be close to $6 million. A 3 to 8% stabilization reserve would be from $2.2 million to $6 million. So our total reserve target is between $16.2 million to $21.2 million, which is 12.2 million. I said 16.27%, I should say, to 21.27%, which is 12.2 million to 15.9 million. So where we have it funded for 2017 currently, we have funded the table reserve. We have a 6.72% funded emergency reserve of $5 million. And so we have just short of $9 million of reserves in the general fund currently, which is just about 12% overall. So for 2018, it all changes based on $80 million of ongoing expenses, changes our table reserve. The table reserve doesn't change till the end of this year based on an accounting calculation of actual revenue. So this is still stated at $3.943 million. Change our emergency reserve target to a new 8%, and in turn change the stabilization reserve. So overall reserve targets are now at $12.77 million to $16.78 million. What we're proposing to fund for 2018 is to increase our reserves by $1 million. That would take us to just short of $10 million of funded reserves, and an overall funded reserve percentage of 12.44%. Getting closer and closer to that 8% emergency reserve. But this is the largest amount of increase towards that emergency reserve that we've been able to ever do, I believe. And that's, again, this is these are fund balance dollars that we're projecting that would be available at the end of 2017. So I'm going to shift now into the Public Safety Fund. I have a quick overview of that fund. Included in the packet was a pro forma for the Public Safety Fund that showed some projections over the next 10 or so years of status of that fund. It doesn't assume, and we're not addressing anything here tonight related to the proposed increase in the Public Safety Fund tax. We will address that in more detail next week, though. So with the current level of sales tax, we are projecting $6.67 million of revenue from that source in 2018, $183,000 of grants, and almost $250,000 from firing range operations. Our expenditures proposed for 2018 are $7.25 million, 47.38 FTE. Only one new FTE being proposed or funded through the sales tax next year. It's in communications that we're increasing from 5 to 6 FTE in communications. We have one-time expenses of $148,000 for police and fire in next year's budget out of this fund, public safety fund. Firing range operations expenses are $462,000, so they're 54% offset by the projected user fee revenues for the firing range. We have a $350,000 payment on the lease on fire station number 1, and then finally a $75,000 towards repayment of the loan that we initiated towards the end of last year to the Fleet Services Fund for a public safety radio replacement. This last item, we omitted it from the original proposed budget, and we'll be adding that. This is one of the additions that we will be wanting to make to the proposed budget. We just missed that one. The public safety fund is okay. Actually, we have a revised pro forma from what we put in the packet that we will include in next week's packet, because we found that we had left out some of the fund balance. So these numbers won't match up to what you have on your attachment, but we'll get you the new pro forma. But it's going to finish 2017 with a $1.1 million fund balance, including an 8% emergency reserve of $550,000. The 2018 budget will take that fund balance down to $888,000, and then the future budgets for the next couple of years call for using $75,000 of fund balance annually for one-time expenses. So we're getting less and less out of this public safety tax for one-time expenses. But we do have the prospect of the lease on the fire station ending in 2020, so that would free up the $350,000 payment for other potential either ongoing or one-time expenses. We would first use those dollars though to pay off the loan for the radios in 2021, because $75,000 a year is not going to do it in that span of time. So that's it on the public safety fund. I have just couple of items I wanted to bring to your attention, and these are just some changes. I'm just trying to keep track. I tell you we're making changes from the proposed budget to what you're actually finally being asked to approve, so I wanted to just list a few of those. These are the ones that we've brought to your attention so far. The one I just mentioned on the loan repayment, the public safety fund, and then the general fund, the change that we talked about for the budget reset item, that we are going to instead do the allocation for the two positions from ETS, as opposed to we were going to reduce the self-insurance fund transfer to the general fund. That we will not be doing that. And then we will talk to you further about other changes. We have identified that we can reduce the amount of transfers to our unemployment insurance fund. It's overfunded, and we're going to lower that down to a level that will be equal to our ongoing costs for unemployment costs on an annual basis. This fund was in serious financial condition a few years back, so we accelerated or increased our payments to this fund, and now so it's in the opposite condition now. We're going to level it off, and we can reduce what we budgeted. We didn't catch that originally, but we are going to reduce that transfer to this fund. What it's going to do in turn will generate some general fund savings, about $48,000, as well as some savings in each of the other funds that contributes to it. And so there'll be reductions in line items throughout the budget. In turn, we are going to propose to use some of that general fund savings for some museum requests that we failed to fund, that are, one of which is really close to a level 1 type request that wasn't categorized correctly. It should have been categorized as level 1, but it's about $25,000 that we'll give you more information on, as well as some second request in the museum that doesn't come to mind that will also, it's a level 2 type request that we'll be recommending that we fund. And then finally some pay corrections that have come up in public safety that we didn't catch. So those don't take up the whole $48,000, but we'll bring that to your attention here in the next week or two. We are going to restate our property tax TIF projections. Told you I'll take you through the Village at the Peaks calculations next week. That in turn is going to be impacted by changes in the property tax TIF projections. So we really have used it's going downwards. Some will call it bad news, but it's going downwards because we used a rough estimate from a few years back. We have more realistic numbers now, and you know, quite frankly, like I said, appeals are going through the end of the week, and this is one of those properties that is under appeal. So the outcome of that appeal is going to have an outcome on our TIF dollars, and so we're going to have to use some estimates that are our best guess at this point in time. So the first ones we used weren't our best guess, I guess. So and then finally, the remaining $191,000 of property tax that I referred to, we will talk to you about potential uses for that. As I mentioned, it would need to be something either one time or making adjustments for future, increasing reserves and things like that, but it shouldn't really be much, if any, towards ongoing expenses because of the potential of that not coming in. So that's all I had for tonight. You have any questions on anything that we've presented tonight?
I don't see any questions. Thanks.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is compensation review for employees appointed by council.
Councilmember Bagley.
We met in executive session. We obviously didn't we didn't vote or come to a consensus, but I'm going to throw out some ideas that I thought sounded good based on what we were saying and asking of the employees. First, the judge, I guess I'd move that I'm looking at our packet. Total annual compensation, the judge is currently 15.1% below market, and his annual base salary is 12.75% below market. I move that we give the judge a raise of 8% of the total annual compensation paid as annual base salary.
I'll second that. So do we want to vote on that? That passes 6-0. Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Combs. I'm just going to keep going. Harold, you're doing a great job. For the record, Harold in executive session said he didn't want a raise. Quite honestly, he deserves one. And in his review, he got nearly perfect marks from all city council members when it comes to trust and job performance. I think that should be rewarded. So Harold right now is total annual compensation is 1.26% below market. His annual base salary is 4.49% below market. And we had talked about a total 3.0% increase in his annual base salary. So not 3% increase of total annual compensation, but 3% increase of his annual base salary.
Okay, so you're making that motion. I'll second that. Let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Santos absent. And Councilmember Bagley.
We have a participation trophy for you, Mr. May. And you can pick it up. It's plastic. It's about 3 inches high. And you can get it next week after council meeting. Thank you. Just kidding. I move that, Eugene's 3.4% total annual compensation below market, and he's 0.9% above his annual base salary. We talked about, and I move that we give Eugene a 1.3% increase in his annual base salary.
All right, that's been moved in second. Let's vote. You know, the one thing that it's hard to factor in these salary surveys, though, is the years of experience. And, you know, so I look at, like, for example, in our city attorney's peers, there's a lot of new peers with very little experience, and he's like the third most experienced. So, you know, that just moving to the average, this doesn't seem like it rewards years of experience as well. So hopefully, you know, we consider that differently next year, or we get more experienced or a better survey pool. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. So now it's time for city managers.
Did you vote?
You didn't vote.
Oh, just a minute.
Now you can chime in. Tell us what to do. You keep us on track.
It's almost like 12 o'clock.
You were going to raise your hands because my technology ran out of votes.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
So, all in favor?
Yeah. No, it speaks.
All right, that passes.
Self-regulating body. No comments. No comments.
Okay, so now we got to actually do final call public invited to be heard. Is anybody from the public who'd like to come speak at this point? Okay, so now it's time for mayor and council comments. I'd like to bring up a couple things. One, I guess we've all heard about this Equifax, data breach. We're now like 150 million people. But anyway, I went online to Equifax, Xperia, TransUnion. You can very easily, in about 45 minutes of drinking a cup of coffee and pulling out your hair and setting new passwords and PIN numbers, you can actually freeze your credit on those 3 things. And if you do that, then no one can use your thing to take out credit. So I would recommend everybody do that. It's kind of funny that Equifax found out about this in July, but I guess their execs were too busy selling their stocks to tell anybody about it until just recently. So it's kind of alarming. So anyway, I'd just like to remind people that it's a pretty simple thing. It takes about 45 minutes, but it's probably an excellent thing to do now that all of our data seems to be out there. The other thing I want to do is brag a little bit about Platte River Power. So bring up this email we got from Tom. So our total mix in 2017, we had still 67% coal. We got 19% hydro, 11% wind, 2% solar, another 1% purchases. So we've really increased significantly from where we were. Our hydropower now, our non-carbon resource mix is 59% hydro, 33% wind, 6% solar, and another 1% distributed solar. So we've gone from in 2010, about 135 megawatts of wind and solar, up to now over 400 megawatts of wind and solar, and how we compare to, basically we're like 31%. Platte River is hydro, wind, and solar combined. Piesco is about 28%, Tri-State's down around 25%, and the Colorado average is like 22%. So we're doing better, we're doing really well, and we're also cheaper than everybody else. So anyway, I think Platte River Power is something that the city of Longmont should be really proud of in the direction we're moving. And we're currently looking at other wind opportunities, maybe as much as 150 megawatts of wind. So anyway, I'm proud of what Platte River Power has accomplished over the last 5 years. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Councilmember Peck and myself were at Community Solutions this morning and got the news from RTD that 2040 is no longer on the table for fast tracks.
It's 2060 now?
No, they wouldn't even give us a date. As well as they're pushing back the 119 BRT. They're going to fund the study, but they're going to stop it there, and they're not going to do anything with that until, what they say, 2024? 23? Yeah, so they pushed that back about 3 years too. So our favorite subject is getting more favorite, I guess. That's one way to put it. Just some more, it just never stops.
Okay, city manager, any comments?
Mayor, Council, just wanted to thank you for your comments and the work that we've done over the last year, and look forward to continue working with you all. It's been a great year, and I think we have a lot left on our plate, and even more to do for our community, so thank you.
City manager, city attorney, any comments? Skipping late.
No comments, Mayor.
I move to reconsider.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.